Welcome back to Ancient Secrets. Sit back, relax, and don't forget to comment where you're watching from down below. It's amazing seeing people all around the world supporting my small channel. Now enjoy the show. Imagine a silent chamber deep in the heart of an ancient Egyptian temple complex, lit only by the flicker of oil lamps. The air is thick with the rich aroma of incense, burning myrrh and frankincense, its curls of smoke twisting like ghostly serpents around the still forms of those who work within. A group of men, the embalmers, move with measured grace around a central table carved in the shape of a lion couch. Upon this table lies a lifeless body of a nobleman, recently departed from the world of the living. He is naked except for a modest cloth over his loins, his skin a pale, waxy colour in the dim light. The chamber is hushed save for the soft shuffling of feet on sand-strewn stone and the faint murmur of sacred chants. Each priest is clad in pure white linen, their shaven heads bowed in reverence. One of them, the chief embalmer, wears a mask shaped like a jackal's head, the visage of Anubis, god of mummification, transforming himself into the deity's earthly proxy. In this sanctified space, time seems to stand still. The living breathe in unison with the dead as the ritual unfolds. It is as if the very walls are holding their breath. By lamplight, the chief embalmer gently touches the forehead of the deceased, murmuring an invocation to the gods of the West, where souls journey after dusk. The other priests respond with a low, rhythmic chant, a prayer in the ancient language that reverberates off the stone. Though the words are foreign to our ears, their intention is almost palpable. They entreat the gods to receive this soul, to purify the body, to guide the dead safely to the land of eternity. In the corners of the room, tall alabaster jars filled with scented oils stand like silent sentinels. Rolls of linen cloth, hundreds of yards of it, are piled neatly on a cedar table nearby, alongside tiny amulets shaped like scarabs, ankhs, and protective eyes. Everything is prepared for an act that to the Egyptians is not grim duty, but sacred art, the art of mummification. But why did these men toil so carefully over a lifeless body? What compelled the living to pour so much love and labour into the dead? The answer lies in the Egyptians' profound faith that death was not an end at all, but a doorway to another form of existence. To their minds, our time on earth was but one chapter of life. Beyond death lay the realm of the gods and the field of reeds, an eternal mirror of Egypt where the deceased would live again, ploughing fields, reaping harvests, feasting with family, and sailing the Nile under never-ending sunshine. However, entry into that blessed realm was not guaranteed. It had to be earned and facilitated by proper rites. Crucially, the soul needed a sound and familiar body to return to. They believed each person's spirit consisted of multiple parts, such as the car and the bar, which would linger near the body or roam free but must reunite with it regularly. If the body decayed or was damaged beyond recognition, these spirits could become lost or unable to recognize their earthly home. Therefore, preserving the body intact was absolutely essential. The mummy would be the home base for the soul, the anchor for the car that would remain in the tomb to receive offerings, and for the biar that would fly out by day and return at night. If the body was safe, the spiritual self could find its way back. This is why every cut, every application of resin, every winding of linen in this chamber carries such urgency. They are safeguarding the very survival of a soul. At the heart of this belief was one of Egypt's most cherished myths, the story of Osiris, the god who first trod the path of death and resurrection. In a time before mortal kings reigned, Osiris was a benevolent god-king who ruled over Egypt. Under his guidance, the land prospered. He taught humans to farm the fertile soil of the Nile, to bake bread and brew beer, to live justly under the principles of Ma'at. Crops were abundant, people content. But Osiris's own brother, Set, harboured a terrible jealousy. Set was lord of the Red Desert, a chaotic counterpart to Osiris's green realms, and envy burned in him like the desert sun. He devised a wicked plan to usurp Osiris. One evening, Set hosted a grand banquet, to which Osiris unsuspectingly came in goodwill. Amid the revelry, Set unveiled a splendid gilded coffin he had secretly commissioned, made precisely to Osiris's measurements. Its inside was inlaid with precious stones, its craftsmanship so fine that the guests marvelled. Set offered it as a prize. Whoever could lie in it exactly would win this magnificent chest. Guest after guest tried to fit themselves inside, but none matched its proportions until Osiris himself was playfully urged to give it a try. Osiris, good-natured and without guile, stepped into the coffin and found it a perfect fit. In that instant, Set's trap was sprung. He and his conspirators slammed the heavy lid shut and sealed it fast with nails and molten lead. Caught unawares, Osiris could not fight back. The air inside ran out, and Osiris suffocated in the darkness of the coffin. Set's henchmen then heaved the sealed coffin into the Nile under the cover of night. The river carried Osiris away on its current, the golden coffin bobbing in the moonlight until it vanished downstream. It was said the Nile itself wept that night, its waters swelling with an unusual flood of tears as it bore its beloved king away. Eventually the coffin drifted out to sea and came ashore far from home, gently cradled by a tamarisk tree on a distant coast. Back in Egypt, Set seized the throne, but his victory was hollow, for the land immediately felt the loss of Osiris. Crops withered, the Nile's inundation came late and thin, and despair hung in the air like a funeral shroud. Isis, however, did not succumb to despair. Osiris's devoted wife, the goddess Isis, resolved to find and restore her husband. With unwavering determination, she embarked on a quest to retrieve Osiris's body. She combed the banks of the Nile in sorrow and fierce hope, accompanied by her sister Nephthys. Night after night, under the pale light of the moon, Isis searched the marshes and the fields, calling out Osiris's name into the darkness. Her tears fell onto the earth as she wandered. They say those tears created the first Nile Delta marsh flowers. After a long journey full of peril and perseverance, Isis at last learned of the coffin's whereabouts in that foreign land. She retrieved Osiris's body and brought it back to Egypt. But her trials were not over. Upon hearing that Osiris had been found, Set flew into a murderous fury. He tracked down Osiris's corpse before Isis could use her magic to revive it, and in a frenzied rage, Set tore the body into 14 pieces. He flung each piece across Egypt, into the Nile, into the desert, determined that his brother would never be made whole again. This horror would have deterred anyone else, but not Isis. Gathering her strength and her divine powers, she transformed into a great kite, a falcon-like bird, and soared over the length of Egypt, using her keen eyes and magic to locate each part of her husband's body. In the waving reeds of the delta, she found one piece. In a lotus swamp, another. In the sands near Abydos, yet another. Each fragment she gently cleansed with Nile water and wine, then wrapped in fine linen bandages, weaving spells of healing and protection into each binding. Helping her was Anubis, the jackal-headed god of embalming. Some legends say Anubis was the son of Osiris and Nephthys. Anubis brought his knowledge of funerary rites to assist in this first mummification. Piece by piece, limb by limb, they reassembled Osiris. Anubis anointed the body with sacred oils and resins, working with the precision of a surgeon and the devotion of a priest, stitching and winding linen to reconnect the severed limbs and cover the wounds. All the while, Isis hovered and chanted powerful incantations taught to her by Thoth, the god of wisdom and magic. When at last Osiris's body was whole again, bound together head to toe in linen, Isis knelt beside him and breathed a long, yearning breath into his mouth. In that sacred moment, Osiris's eyes opened. He lived again, awakened by the love and magic of Isis and the careful ministrations of Anubis. Osiris's flesh had been made divine and incorruptible. He had become the first mummy. On the night of the next full moon, under silver light, Isis conceived their posthumous son, Horus, with the resurrected Osiris. Soon after, Osiris, having fulfilled this miracle, could no longer remain in the realm of the living. He withdrew to the Duat, the mysterious underworld, where he took his place as king and judge of the dead. From then on, all who died and were properly embalmed could hope to follow in his footsteps. Osiris's triumph over death, achieved through the gathering of his body and the proper rituals, became the divine blueprint for eternal life. To the Egyptians, this myth was far more than just a story. It was the foundation of their entire mortuary religion. Osiris's victory over death through ritual and divine aid provided a template that every Egyptian hoped to emulate. Each mummified deceased was identified with Osiris. In funerary texts, the dead person is often called the Osiris name, explicitly linking them with the god who conquered death. Every step the priests took, washing the body, wrapping it, uttering spells, was in imitation of what Isis and Anubis had done for Osiris. Thus, when the embalmers in our story work on this nobleman's body, they are consciously reenacting that first mummification. They are not merely treating a corpse, they are performing a sacred drama that transforms a human into a divine being, an Osiris who will rise again. With the Osiris myth enshrined in their hearts, the embalmers in this chamber proceed with renewed purpose, treating the dead not as a lifeless corpse to be discarded, but as a god in the making. By the period of this nobleman's death, likely during Egypt's New Kingdom, the embalmer's craft had already been evolving for over a millennium. The art of mummification probably began in earnest around 2600 BCE, and through generations of trial and devotion, the priests had greatly refined their methods. They discovered how to extract the brain and internal organs with minimal external damage, how long to leave a body in natron for optimal drying. Too little time and the body might retain moisture, too long and the tissues could become too brittle, and which resins and oils best protected the flesh from decay. These techniques were often closely guarded secrets, passed from master embalmers to apprentices, and sometimes recorded in secret instruction papyri. By the New Kingdom, mummification had reached a peak of effectiveness. Some of the best preserved mummies in history come from that era. Yet, for all their technical skill, the embalmers still approached each new body with reverence and caution, adhering strictly to the time-honoured rituals. In their minds, they were not just technicians but guardians of a sacred trust. Every mummy they prepared was a chance to replay the victory of Osiris over death, and they strove to get every detail right, as their ancestors had taught them. Thus, our priests work with steady hands and focused minds, confident in knowledge honed over centuries, even as they intone ancient prayers to infuse that knowledge with divine power. As the priests now turn their attention fully to the body on the table, the practical work of mummification begins. two embalmers step forward with ritualistic care. They begin by purifying the body, washing it with water drawn from the sacred Nile and with palm wine. The quiet dripping of water over flesh is the only sound besides the soft chanting. They bathe the corpse as tenderly as one would a sleeping child, cleaning away any impurities of this world. The body is being made a suitable vessel for eternity. Imagine the gentle trickle of water mixed with crushed lotus and herbs, running along the contours of the body and puddling on the stone table. The scent of the cleansing wine and herbs rises, a sharp, clean smell overlaying the sweet musk of incense. To an outside observer, it almost appears as if they are caring for someone who might awaken, fresh and renewed. In a sense, they believe he will awaken, when the time is right, in the world beyond. Before making any incisions in the body's trunk, the embalmers attend to the removal of the brain, a step both delicate and slightly macabre. One assistant takes a slender metal rod with a hooked end and carefully inserts it up the nostril of the corpse. With practiced motions, he punctures the thin bone at the top of the nasal cavity, creating a pathway into the skull's interior. Through this opening, the priest gently stirs and liquefies the brain matter. In the silence, one might imagine a faint cracking sound as the bone is breached, but the embalmers are unperturbed. To them, this is a necessary act of cleansing. After sufficient mixing, they tilt the body slightly and angle the head forward. A reddish-brown fluid, the dissolved brain, begins to trickle out from the nose into a bronze bowl waiting below. Whatever portions remain inside the cranium are flushed with a little palm wine and an infusion of antiseptic herbs, then coaxed out with the hook or drained by gravity. Within minutes, the skull is empty and rinsed. They regard the brain as having no role in conscious identity or the afterlife. In their philosophy, thought and emotion reside in the heart. So removing it is simply a prudent measure to prevent decay inside the head. Later they will pack the skull with linen and resin to maintain its shape and keep the features from collapsing. This grisly-sounding task complete, the chief embalmer can now proceed to the next critical step. Now the chief embalmer lifts a gleaming blade made from obsidian, an Ethiopian stone known for its sharpness. In the quiet, the only sound is a collective intake of breath as he makes a decisive incision on the left side of the abdomen. This cut, about 4 inches long, is the first invasive act on the body, and, in a different context, it might seem brutal. But here it is an act of healing necessity, a necessary wound to ultimately save the body from ruin. Through this opening, the practitioners reach inside the body, their hands guided by both anatomical knowledge and ritual directives. Carefully, they remove the organs that decay most quickly. One by one, the stomach, liver, lungs, and intestines are drawn out of the cavity. There is no gore splattering, no careless haste, only a deep solemnity as each organ is lifted free as though it were a sacred relic. As each organ emerges, a waiting priest receives it and carries it reverently to a side table. 4 small canopic jars stand ready, carved from alabaster and painted with faces of protective deities. Each organ will reside in its own jar under the guardianship of one of the 4 sons of Horus. The liver is placed in the jar topped with the human-headed Imseti. The lungs go into the baboon-headed Hapi. The stomach is entrusted to Duamutef with a jackal's face, and the intestines are secured in the falcon-headed Kebesenuef. As each organ is deposited, priests anoint it with palm wine and resin, then pack the jar with natron and linen. They murmur incantations invoking the protection of these gods. Imseti, guard my liver, keep it safe for all eternity. Happy, watch over my lungs, let them breathe again in the hereafter, and so forth. The jars are then sealed. Later, they will be placed in the tomb near the mummy, or in some cases for later mummies, the wrapped organs will be returned to the body or nestled alongside it, with dummy canopic jars left as symbolic stand-ins. Throughout this process, not a single drop of blood is seen. The body has long since fallen silent and circulation ceased. The priests work in a clean field of dried tissue, their hands deft and sure. Only the heart remains in the body, left untouched. The embalmers will not remove the heart, for to the ancient Egyptian it is the core of being, the seat of emotion, intellect, will, and morality. It is the very essence of the person and will be needed on the day of judgment in the hall of Ma'at. A priest reaches into the chest cavity and gently touches the heart in situ, as if reassuring it. He recites a prayer over it, perhaps the words that will later be inscribed on a heart scarab amulet. O my heart which I had from my mother, O heart of my different ages, do not stand up as a witness against me. This is a plea that when the heart is weighed against the feather of truth, it will not betray the soul with guilt. The heart is thus consecrated to remain steadfast. It will be left in place within the chest, the only organ allowed to accompany the body whole, because without it the deceased could not hope to pass the final judgment or be fully themselves in the afterlife. With the visceral organs removed, the body is now an empty shell, but one that the embalmers will transform into an eternal vessel. They cleanse the interior of the body cavity with palm wine and an infusion of aromatic spices. The sharp, astringent scent of the wine mingles with the sweeter notes of cinnamon and cassia that they use as antiseptics. Every crevice of the torso is rinsed and purified. The priests might even pack small sachets of powdered myrrh or frankincense inside for a moment, and then remove them, to let the fragrance penetrate the tissues. Once they are satisfied that the inside is clean, they begin the drying process that is the crux of mummification. They gather natron, a naturally occurring salt mixture collected from dry lake beds in the Egyptian desert. Natron is the miracle substance of this process, a desiccant with the power to wick away moisture and halt decay. It looks like coarse baking soda, crystalline white with a slight alkaline bite, and to the Egyptians it is nothing less than sacred powder. In fact, the word for natron in their language means divine salt. The embalmers pack the body's emptied torso with loose natron crystals and linen pouches filled with natron. They gently stuff natron into the skull cavity, through the nose as well. Then, together, they lift the body and place it in a sloped cedar trough. They cover the corpse entirely with heaps of natron, almost burying it in salt. Under the body, around it, inside it, natron everywhere, drawing out the fluids of degeneration. Now begins a long waiting period, a liminal pause between death and rebirth. For 40 full days the body will remain covered in natron, undisturbed. The chamber is kept cool and dry. Each day or so the priests enter quietly to check the progress. They may replace packets of natron inside or add fresh natron on top as the crystals become damp from the drawn-out fluids. Gradually the soft tissues of the body surrender their moisture to the thirsty salt. The flesh, which once yielded to the touch, hardens and darkens as the natron does its work. The corpse slowly becomes a dried, shrunken form of its former self. By the end of the designated time, the body that was once perhaps 150 pounds in life might weigh a fraction of that. It is now a light, desiccated husk, like leather over bone. Throughout these weeks of drying, the chamber is tended but mostly quiet. The embalmers have sealed it to prevent scavenging insects or excessive humidity from disturbing the body as it desiccates. They continue to burn incense, frankincense, cedar and juniper, both to sanctify the space and to mask any unpleasant odours of the early decay that the natron is busily arresting. By now, though, there is little smell. The natron has absorbed it. In the dim lamplight, one might see the silhouette of a priest occasionally coming to turn the body over or adjust the natron packets, all with gentle, almost loving care. Perhaps he recites a soft spell each time he tends the corpse. Body, be firm, body, be pure, you shall not decay. Indeed, a text from the Book of the Dead has the deceased triumphantly proclaim, I do not rot, I do not putrefy, I do not turn to worms. I shall not be destroyed in my bandages. My body is firm, it shall not perish forever. These words encapsulate exactly what the embalmers are achieving during this drying time. The idea of physical corruption is anathema to them, and here they are actively preventing it. Outside the embalming chamber, life continues. The sun rises and sets over the Nile's flowing waters, oblivious to the nobleman's absence. The household of the deceased is not idle either. This liminal period is filled with activity. The family commissions artisans to carve the final touches on his coffin and to paint the last scenes on the tomb walls. Workers in the necropolis quarry stone for his sarcophagus and polish statuettes of protective gods that will be placed around him. Scribes compose lists of food offerings and prayers on papyrus to be buried with him. Carpenters build furniture for the tomb, chairs, a bed, storage chests, so that he will want for nothing in eternity. His wife and children sift through his finest garments and jewellery, choosing those that will go into the tomb for his use in the afterlife. In short, the entire household partakes in the preparations. Everyone has a duty to ensure that, by the time the embalmers have done their work, all is ready for the grand send-off. They all know that once the 70 days of mummification are over, the funeral will take place and the tomb must be fully provisioned. A deadline looms, and love motivates their feverish efforts. But here, inside the embalming chamber, none of that hustle is visible. Here it is perpetually twilight, a still space where the pace of decay has been stopped and the breath of eternity already pervades. It was ordained that the full embalming and burial process takes 70 days from death to interment. 40 of those days are devoted to drying the body in natron, and about 30 for the subsequent anointing, wrapping, and final ceremonies. This span of 70 days is not only practical but also cosmic in significance. It echoes the cycle of the star Sirius, sacred to the Egyptians, which disappears from the night sky for roughly 70 days each year. When Sirius rises again, its heliacal rising just before dawn, it heralds the annual flooding of the Nile and the Egyptian New Year, a time of renewal and rebirth for the land. By aligning their funeral timetable with this celestial cycle, the Egyptians perhaps believed they were harmonizing the fate of the soul with the rhythms of the cosmos. As Sirius returned shining brightly after its 70-day absence, so too would the soul emerge from the tomb after 70 days of preparation, ready to be reborn. In this way, even the timing of mummification was woven into the fabric of the universe, tying the fate of the deceased to the eternal dance of the stars. At last, the appointed day comes. After weeks of drying, the hardest work is done. The embalmers gather once more around the body to inspect it. They brush away the natron crystals that surround the corpse and gingerly remove the packets of salt from inside the chest cavity. What emerges is remarkable. The body is now very light, very dry, and entirely free of the wet decay that would have corrupted it. The skin has turned a deep brown and clings closely to the bones. The face is shrunken, features eagle-sharp. Yet it is undeniably still the shape of a human being, recognizable in its contours. The natron has made him a desert creature, all moisture driven away. To the embalmers, this dried form is a success. They have created an inch thing of eternity, a body that time will struggle to destroy. Now they set about restoring what the drying process has depleted. The corpse's divine transformation continues with anointing and refilling. They rinse the body quickly with fresh water to remove any clinging salt and pat it dry. Then come the sacred oils and unguents. A priest brings forth a tray of small alabaster pots and pours a bit of each onto his palms. There is cedar oil, thick and resinous, myrrh and frankincense oil, sweet and aromatic, lotus blossom extract, subtle and calming, even an essence of juniper and cinnamon. One by one, these oils are massaged into the skin of the corpse. The embalmers knead the stiff limbs, coating them with these liquids. The room, which had smelled sterile and mineral during the drying, is now flooded with a symphony of perfume, the balm of 100 flowers and resins, returning life's fragrance to the body. The skin, which was papery and brittle, drinks in the oils and becomes slightly supple and lustrous. To the Egyptians, these oils are the fluids of rebirth, the same way the gods' bodies are said to be anointed in heaven. By anointing the mummy, they are recharging its senses and preserving its flesh against corruption. Next, they carefully stuff the body to restore a lifelike fullness. The sunken areas are packed with linen cloth. They fill the cavities of the torso with clean, dry linens soaked in warm resin and scented with spices. The resin will harden and give internal support, while the linens bulk out the chest and belly to something like their former shape. They pad underneath the skin where it collapsed, perhaps inserting linens into the cheeks to round them, or behind the eye sockets they may place small onions or linen balls to prop the eyelids. They line the inside of the abdominal cavity with aromatic sawdust and more packets of myrrh to keep it dry and sweet-smelling. Where the organs were removed, they might insert symbolic substitutes. For instance, sometimes a wax or linen figure of a scarab is placed where the heart is, or small charms to stand in for the missing internal parts. They also take this moment to place a large, flat stone or amulet engraved with protective spells over the incision in the abdomen, like a patch sealing the breach. This object is often called the embalmer's seal, and it is usually decorated with an image of Anubis or magical inscriptions to guard the cut. The body at this stage is a paradox, lifeless yet lifelike in form, inert yet heavily imbued with sacred substances. Its hollows are filled, its exterior rubbed with unguents, its structure reinforced. False eyes of obsidian or painted stone might be gently placed beneath the eyelids, so that when the wrappings come, the mummy will have eyes to see. The priests even fit a small piece of sacred gold leaf on the tongue, an offering to magically restore the ability to speak. Every detail is thought of. Now the wrapping can begin. Each priest's role shifts. Those with the steadiest hands take up positions at the head and feet, while others prepare the linens and resin. This phase requires intense concentration and is where the most time will be spent. The chief embalmer recites prayers continuously as his colleagues work, or perhaps a lector priest, a specialist in ritual texts, stands to the side reading from a scroll the litanies that must accompany each stage of wrapping. Each strip of linen has been cut to size, some broad like bandages for the torso, others narrow like ribbons for fingers and toes. The linen itself is of high quality for a nobleman. It's clean, white and finely woven, often from the flax of the Nile Valley. The Egyptians hold linen as a symbol of purity and light. They sometimes call it woven moonlight, due to its soft white radiance. In using linen to enfold the dead, they believe they are clothing them in purity itself. They begin with the head. Taking a narrow strip of linen, an embalmer holds it over a brazier of smouldering incense to sanctify it with the fragrance. Then he dips a brush in a pot of warm liquid resin that was distilled from pine trees imported from distant lands, and paints the end of the linen strip with this sticky substance. He carefully presses that end against the crown of the head to anchor it, then slowly begins winding the strip around the head, round and round, under the chin and over the scalp, creating a secure wrap that holds the jaw closed and covers the ears. As he does this, another priest stands by his side whispering an incantation. May your head be wrapped and protected. May your face be made divine. May your sight be restored in the afterlife. They are effectively binding magic into the very first bandage. The white linen contrasts starkly with the brown skin for a moment, until more layers cover all. Soon the face is hidden, the features smoothing into the anonymous countenance of a mummy. But the priests often pause after the first layers on the face to place special items. A linen pad over the closed eyes, perhaps, so they don't appear sunken, and often a small jade or faience amulet, shaped like the Ujjat eye of Horus, is set over the spot where the embalming cut was made on the left side of the face or neck. If any part of the body was damaged or opened, like the nostrils or the abdominal incision, an amulet or spell is positioned there to guard it. They proceed to the fingers and toes next. Extraordinary as it may seem, each finger and each toe is individually wrapped with thin strips of linen. An embalmer takes a piece, perhaps half an inch wide, and winds it gently around the deceased's thumb, from tip to base, then does the same for each finger. Another does the toes similarly. They do this to ensure every extremity is protected and intact, so that his fingers may bend and work in the hereafter, the priest might murmur. One can imagine him whispering a charm for each digit. May your fingers wiggle and grasp again when you play the senet game in the field of reeds. May your legs walk freely in the gardens of Osiris. Indeed, every part of the body must be preserved and consecrated, because the person will need all their limbs and faculties in the next life. Between the layers of linen on the hands and feet, they sometimes slip tiny amuletic rings onto the fingers or beads between the toes, magic rings to strengthen the grip in the afterlife or protect the steps of the feet. After fingers and toes are done, the embalmers wrap the hands and feet as units. The fingers, now individually cocooned, are brought together, and a wider bandage winds around the whole hand, enclosing it like a mitten of linen. The feet are wrapped from the toes up to the ankle as well, forming two compact bundles at the end of the legs. The priests take care to wrap the feet at a slightly natural angle, not simply at 90 degrees, so that the deceased will be comfortable standing or walking in the afterlife. Now they begin wrapping the limbs. Starting at the deceased's left leg, they wind long strips of linen around, working upward from ankle to knee, then knee to hip. Then the right leg receives the same treatment. At this point, each leg is separately wrapped from foot to upper thigh. The arms are next. They extend each arm slightly away from the body and wrap from the wrists upward to the shoulders. Sometimes, for particularly meticulous mummies, they even wrap each finger and arm separately before binding them together. In our case, the nobleman's arms will eventually be positioned straight alongside his body, a common position for non-royals of this era. But for now they wrap them individually to ensure the shape and preservation of each limb. Between each circuit of wrapping, the priests perform a crucial act. They place amulets and recite spells at strategic points. As the bandages cover the legs, a priest slips a small metal amulet in the shape of a papyrus column, a D-jed pillar, symbol of stability, behind the knee or along the thigh to give strength to the legs. As the bandages cover the arms, they tuck an amulet shaped like a small ladder, pet, near the elbows, symbolizing the ladder to the heavens that the deceased may climb. Over the stomach area, before it's completely shrouded, they place a carved wax figure of a jackal or a plaque depicting the goddess Serket, who guards the intestines, then wrap over it, sandwiching it between layers of linen directly above where the intestines used to be. At each placement, the attending priest intones the appropriate spell from the scroll of embalming rites, perhaps, O Osiris, name, receive the protection of the jackal god who fends off thieves from your bread and water, or Serket is with you, and no venom of decay shall touch your bowels. Every amulet, every whispered line, reinforces the magical armour being built up around this body. Egyptian embalming manuals even preserved special names for certain bandages, as if each strip of linen carried its own spell. One text instructs the priest to apply the bandages of Isis and the bandages of Nephthys around the head, symbolically placing the caring arms of those protective goddesses on the deceased. Another bandage for the throat might be called the bandage of Sokar, meant to ensure the mummy's voice is strong when it speaks in the Hall of Judgment. Even the simple linen pads placed under the feet could be given names like the Earth Carrier, signifying that they allow the deceased to walk upon the earth again. By naming the bindings and uttering those names aloud as they worked, the priests gave life to the wrappings themselves, making every layer an active guardian of the body. The priests do not speak loudly as they work. Most of their utterances are low chants or whispers, almost indistinguishable from the crackle of oil lamps. Each placement of an amulet is accompanied by a soft spell. Each layer of linen is laid down with a murmured prayer. They constantly repeat the deceased's name, weaving the identity into the wrappings. Nebemarket, live forever, they say under their breath at every major joint they wrap, or Nebemarket, you are young again, as they wind the linen across his chest. Through repetition, the very fabric is imbued with the person's being. The bandages are not just physical protection, but also a lattice of spoken and unspoken spells, binding his identity and life force tightly to his preserved flesh. In some moments, the chief embalmer may pause and in a clear voice recite a longer formula. Rise up, O Osiris Nebemarket, shake off your dust. I have bandaged your flesh, I have knit your bones, I have gathered your limbs. No part of you shall be lost. The work is like creating a magic cocoon. At intervals, the wrapping stops, and the embalmers perform another crucial step, the application of resin. A large bowl of heated pine resin, now liquid and dark, sits nearby on a brazier to keep it warm. Using brushes made of palm fibre, they paint this resin generously over the bandaged legs and arms that have been completed so far. The resin soaks into the linen, staining it a warm amber colour and gluing the layers together. When it cools, it will harden, forming a protective, water-resistant shell around the limbs. A faint scent of pine and pitch wafts through the chamber as they do this. The resin also has antibacterial properties, further ensuring no decay will set in. The priests effectively laminate the body in multiple layers of linen and resin, alternating wrapping and coating. This process is repeated several times. Wrap a few layers, then apply resin, then wrap more. Each cycle adds both protection and stability to the form. Now attention turns to the torso and the head, which were initially only partly wrapped. The embalmers carefully wrap the torso, crisscrossing bandages over the chest and abdomen, securing the arms against the sides. They wrap the shoulders and neck, joining the bindings of the arms to the body. so that now the whole figure from neck to toe is swathed in white cloth. Only the head remains distinct, swaddled but not yet integrated with the body's wrappings. The corpse has truly been transformed into a mummy shape, a straight, cocooned form. They apply resin over the torso wrappings now, once again brushing the sticky substance over the entire mummy from the neck down to the feet. It glistens in the lamplight and emits little curls of fragrant smoke as it cools and hardens. Before the head is entirely covered and lost to view beneath final cloths, the priests perform a beautiful ritual touch. A funerary mask is placed over the mummy's face. For a nobleman of means, this mask may be a cartonnage portrait, layers of linen and stucco moulded to the features of the deceased and painted in lifelike detail. In our nobleman's case, his family had commissioned a fine mask. The face is painted gold to symbolize the skin of the gods, with bright eyes outlined in kohl and a calm, slight smile. A blue and gold striped headpiece, Nemes, is painted around the face, evoking the royal iconography. Even if he is not a pharaoh, this style is common for masks of the period. The mask is carefully set onto the head, aligned so that its eyes are right above where the mummy's true eyes lie closed beneath. For the first time since his death, Nebuchadnezzar's face is visible again to the world, though in idealized immortal form. This is the face his Ba, soul, will recognize and the face he will present to the gods. Often, between the layers of head wrapping, the priests also inserted protective amulets. One common example is a small amulet of the goddess Isis or Nephthys in the form of a falcon or kite, placed on top of the head or at the brow to guard the mummy's senses. They might also place a thin plate of gold over the spot of the mouth, a little tongue plate, to magically allow speech. With the mask in place and these last amulets added, they begin the final head wrappings, securing the mask and closing the mummy. Long strips of linen now go around the masked head, holding the mask tightly to the face. They wrap diagonally over the head and under the chin, then horizontally across the face, without obscuring the mask's features. Ideally, some masks cover all, others have open eyes. More resin is painted to glue these final strips. The head and body are now one contiguous wrapped form. The mummy is almost complete. To finish, the embalmers take one last large linen sheet, the final shroud, and wrap it around the entire mummy from head to toe. This shroud is like a big blanket enveloping the whole figure. They tie it with narrow linen bands at several points around the ankles, the waist, and the chest to keep it snug. Those ties themselves might be knotted in special ways. One of them often uses the Tet or Isis knot, a magical knot that invokes Isis's protection, effectively binding the goddess's blessing onto the mummy. When the last knot is tied, the work of many weeks is finally done. The mummy is complete. What lies on the table now is no longer simply a dead human body. It is a new form, an amalgam of flesh, linen, resin, and magic, a form the Egyptians call a sar, meaning noble or dignified one. The deceased has been transfigured into an effective spirit in the making. For the embalmers, this is a moment of triumph. In their eyes, they have tamed death itself, cocooning the chaos of decay inside endless layers of order and prayer. What was once vulnerable, mortal flesh has now been sanctified into a form fit for eternity. They have taken a helpless corpse and empowered it with divine potential. Death's corrupting hand has been stayed. Every bandage is like a chain binding death, every amulet a weapon warding off chaos. The transformation is visually and spiritually complete. A mortal has been made into an immortal, an Osiris, wrapped and ready to rise. The silent chamber, once heavy with the sorrow and fear of death, is now filled only with the perfumes of resin and the unspoken assurance that this soul will continue. In that stillness, one might imagine a lurking shadow, the presence of death itself, slipping away defeated, for it has been denied its prize. The priests step back and breathe out, perhaps offering a final collective prayer of thanks to the gods for the success of the ritual. They have fulfilled their sacred duty. Such elaborate burial practices might suggest to an outsider that the Egyptians were preoccupied with death. In truth, they were ardently preoccupied with life. They loved life so much. The warmth of the sun on skin, the taste of cool water, the laughter of children, the beauty of starlight, that they could not accept it simply ending. All these rituals were, at their core, in service of life. As they often said, the afterlife would be a mirror of the best of this life. Thus they laboured for months so that the departed could continue to enjoy what they cherished. Their own writings echo this sentiment. They could think of no life better than the present, and so they ensured it would continue after death. The embalmers are not quite done with their responsibilities. The mummy, fully wrapped and shrouded, is lifted from the lion bed and placed into a wooden coffin shaped like a human, an anthropoid coffin that has been painted and gilded. The coffin's exterior is adorned with protective figures. Isis spreads her wings across the foot area, Nephthys at the head. Hieroglyphic texts encircle the coffin like rings of enchantment. The likeness of Nebuchadnezzar is painted on the coffin lid, merging with the mask beneath. Once the mummy is settled inside, the coffin lid is closed and sealed with resin or plaster. The chief embalmer symbolically clasps the coffin with both hands and declares that the deceased is now ready for burial. Outside, the day of the funeral has arrived. The sun blazes high over the western desert, where the royal and noble tombs lie. From the house of embalming, a solemn procession forms to escort Nebuchadnezzar to his tomb. The coffin is placed on a sledge draped in panther skins and pulled by oxen or by servants towards the necropolis. Leading the way are priests burning incense, the smoke trailing behind them in curls. Other priests carry the 4 canopic jars, held high like holy regalia. Servants follow bearing chests of food, linens, ointments, and all the goods that were so carefully prepared during the 70 days. There are bouquets of lotus flowers and papyrus laid upon the coffin, and jars of sacred Nile water to be used in final rituals. Behind the coffin walk the mourners. The chief mourners are typically women, Nebuchadnezzar's widow and his mother, accompanied by professional mourning women who have been hired to amplify the expressions of grief. 2 of these women may have taken on the ritual roles of Isis and Nephthys, as was traditional. They wear loose, flowing blue garments and loosened hair, and they position themselves at the head and foot of the coffin during ceremonies, embodying the 2 goddess sisters who mourned Osiris. These chief mourners and other family members sob and ululate, their voices rising in heart-rending waves of grief. They call out Nebuchadnezzar's name in anguish. "O Nebuchadnezzar, O dear one, do not leave us." Some tear at their linen clothes or scatter dust into their hair as a sign of despair. The widow, tears streaming down her face, might cling to the coffin for a moment, placing a final lotus flower upon it, a last gift of love, before it is carried into the tomb. The mother wails a traditional lament. "O my child, my heart, you have gone to the west, but you take a part of me with you." Even as priests gently urge them on to proceed with the rite, the raw sorrow of the family fills the air, a poignant counterpoint to the clinical precision of the embalming process. This is the human side of the ritual, love and grief laid bare. The sound of their keening echoes off the desert cliffs, a piercing reminder that, For all the grand theology and magical texts, death is a deeply personal loss. The procession arrives at the mouth of the tomb, a carved entrance leading into the cool darkness of Nebuchadnezzar's house of eternity. Before the coffin is taken inside, there are final ceremonies to be performed in the sunlight. Priests clad in leopard skin cloaks, the attire of high ritual, approach the coffin to enact the opening of the mouth, ritual, the most important rite before sealing the tomb. The coffin is propped upright or laid on a special stand. The beautiful mask and coffin face of Nebuchadnezzar gazes outward, golden in the sun's rays. A priest carrying a peculiar instrument called a piseshkef, often a bent adze or a spoon-shaped blade of meteoric iron, comes forward. He touches this instrument to the mummy's mouth through the coffin, or directly if the coffin lid has been slid open briefly, and recites, "Your mouth is opened by Ptah, your mouth is opened by Sokar, with this instrument of iron. You shall speak as a living being, you shall eat and drink as a living being forever." He then touches the instrument to the eyes. "Your eyes are opened, you shall see the sun and behold the gods." He touches the ears. "Your ears are opened, you shall hear the voice of your children." He touches the nose. "Your nose is opened, you shall breathe the sweet northerly breeze." He touches the hands and feet. "Your limbs are freed, you shall move and act as in life." By these actions, the Egyptians believed the mummy's senses and faculties were supernaturally restored. Although physically the body remains inert, spiritually Nebuchadnezzar can now see, hear, speak, breathe and move in the afterlife as he once did on earth. At this climactic moment, it is as though Nebuchadnezzar is reborn. The earlier quiet sobbing of the family might swell into a more jubilant ululation, because this ceremony is hopeful. It proclaims that the deceased lives again in the spiritual sense. A calf is sacrificed, or a ceremonial calf's leg is presented, as part of this ritual, symbolizing the provision of food for the afterlife and echoing the myth where a bull was offered to reanimate Osiris. Nebuchadnezzar, through his representatives, symbolically tastes bread and beer one last time in the world of the living, ensuring he can partake of sustenance beyond. Now the time has come to place the mummy in the tomb. Pallbearers, likely strong male relatives or hired helpers, carry the coffin into the cool, shadowed chambers that have been prepared. Inside the tomb is a fully furnished home for eternity. The walls are painted with vibrant scenes of Nebuchadnezzar in life. There he is shown overseeing his estate, ploughing with oxen, hunting birds in the marshes with his wife by his side. There he sits at a lavish banquet table piled with food while musicians play, an idealized version of what he loved in life, to be made real again in death. Inscriptions of prayers and spells cover other parts of the walls and the coffin, written in rows and columns of beautiful hieroglyphs. They are excerpts from the Book of the Dead and other sacred texts, ready to be spoken by the spirits or Nebuchadnezzar's own Ka when needed. Piles of grave goods fill the chambers, jars of grain, beer and water, baskets of dried fish and dates. Linen garments folded carefully, Nebuchadnezzar's favourite board game set, the game of Senet, for passing eternity, a chair and bed for comfort, Shabti figures, little mummy-shaped statuettes inscribed with spells, lined up by the dozens to serve as servants who will magically spring to life and do any labour required of Nebuchadnezzar in the afterlife fields. In short, everything he might need or want has been provided lovingly and lavishly. The coffin is placed in its designated spot, perhaps within a larger stone sarcophagus, or within multiple coffins, if he had them. The priests perform a few final acts. They arrange protective amulets and talismans around the coffin, often a Djed pillar amulet, an Ekek charm, or figures of Anubis that will guard the tomb's entrance. They pour a libation of water on the threshold and light some incense for the last time, letting the fragrant smoke curl through the air of the tomb chamber, sanctifying it and inviting the Ka of Nebuchadnezzar to come and reside here and partake of the offerings. "Everything is done as it should be," announces the high priest. "All things needed for life are here. All rites for resurrection are completed." It is the signal that the time has come to seal the tomb. Nebuchadnezzar's family step forward for their final farewell in this world. They know that once the tomb is shut, they will not see his physical form again, though they will come to this place to commune with his spirit. The widow gently touches the coffin, perhaps pressing her forehead to it. She whispers a tearful goodbye, or a promise to keep his memory. The eldest son, if he has one, takes a handful of sand and tosses it over the coffin, an age-old gesture echoing Osiris's burial and signifying, "May you take root and rise again." The door slabs or blocking stones are put into place by workmen. As the darkness encloses the painted chamber, the last sunlight glints off the gold of Nebuchadnezzar's mask and the bright colours of the frescoes. One might imagine that in that moment, in the silence, Nebuchadnezzar's bar flutters down in the form of a bird and perches on the coffin, seeing with satisfaction that all is as it should be. Outside the tomb, a priest recites a final prayer and likely addresses the living family. "O you who loved him on earth, continue to remember Nebuchadnezzar, true of voice. Speak his name and pour water for him. As he lives in the afterlife, so shall he live in your hearts." The tomb entrance is then plastered shut and perhaps marked with Nebuchadnezzar's name, and a curse upon any who would violate it. The funeral cortege slowly departs, leaving the tomb in the hands of the gods and Nebuchadnezzar's own spirit. Inside the sealed tomb, all is darkness and profound quiet. But it is not a terrifying, empty darkness to the Egyptian mind. It is a fertile, waiting darkness. The paintings on the walls seem to almost stir in the flicker of the oil lamp that was left behind to burn out. The spells inscribed there hum with latent power, for the Egyptians have ensured that the tomb is not merely a dead space, but a microcosm of life and protection. Through a magical process known only to their faith, those models and pictures on the walls are believed to become the real things when needed. A painted servant carrying a loaf of bread will, in the realm of spirits, become a real servant carrying real bread for Nebuchadnezzar. The written offering lists will manifest as actual offerings by virtue of the spells. The tomb, though physically silent now, is conceptually full of music, chatter, and activity. In the stillness, Nebuchadnezzar's Ka inhabits the chamber, absorbing the nourishment of the food and drink laid out on the offering table. His bar, as day breaks again outside, takes wing in the form of a bird with a human face, and flutters out through the small bar door left in the tomb's design for that purpose. It will travel in the world of the living, perhaps visiting the sunlit lands it knew, then return by nightfall to reunite with the mummy. Every night the bar will fly back, drawn to the familiar wrapped body resting in the sarcophagus. Recognizing its form, preserved intact and recognizable, the bar can comfort itself that it still has a home, a refuge. And when the time comes for Nebuchadnezzar's ultimate journey through the underworld, all parts of his being are aligned and ready. His preserved body anchors him, his Ka is supplied and strong, his bar is free but connected, and his Ak, the unified spirit, can now be born. Now the narrative of Nebuchadnezzar's journey shifts from the world of preparation to the world of mystery, the voyage of the soul through the Duat, the Egyptian underworld. As Nebuchadnezzar's funerary crew departs and the sun sinks below the horizon, we follow the path that the Egyptians mapped out for the soul. The Ba of Nebuchadnezzar, newly empowered by the rituals, leaves the tomb as a fluttering bird at dusk to begin the perilous night journey. It carries with it the spells of the Book of the Dead that were buried with the mummy, and the protective power of the amulets nestled in the bandages. Soon the BA approaches a massive doorway in the underworld, a portal to the first region of night. This gate is guarded by a fierce, otherworldly being, a hulking figure with the face of a hippo and the body of a lion, brandishing a sword of fire. The path is barred. In the thick darkness a voice booms, "Stop, you who would pass. Declare yourself by the name known to the gods, or be turned away." To an unprepared soul, this would be a moment of terror, but Nebuchadnezzar's BR is armed with the knowledge painstakingly provided by the bandages and texts. The appropriate spell leaps to mind, spell 147, the spell for opening the gates. The Ba speaks in a clear voice the secret names of the gate and its guardian, names learned from the inscriptions sewn into his wrappings and written on his papyrus scroll. "I am he of pure tongue, coming with Ma'at," the Ba declares. "I know your name, O gatekeeper, he who eats shadows. Stand aside, for I am true of voice and have been made whole by the rites of Osiris." At the utterance of the correct passwords, the guardian's fierce eyes soften. It steps back, and the great door creaks open, allowing Nebuchadnezzar's soul to pass into the next corridor of the Duat. The journey continues. In the illustrated vignettes of the Book of the Dead, we can follow the soul's voyage as if watching a drama. Those ancient papyri show the deceased travelling in a solar bark, boat, through winding rivers of the underworld, confronted by all manner of eerie beings. As Nebuchadnezzar's BR ventures deeper, the darkness around it is populated with strange sounds and lights. There are serpents slithering in the gloom. Some are monstrous with multiple heads or knives for tails. A giant serpent named Apophis, embodiment of chaos, lies in wait to devour any unwary soul. Indeed, Apophis even nightly attacks the sun god's boat. But lo, from within the mummy's bandages back in the tomb emanates protection. One of the amulets wrapped with Nebuchadnezzar was a tiny bronze snake pierced by a blade, an Apophis charm. At this point in the Duat, that charm activates in a metaphysical sense. Nebuchadnezzar's Ba finds a surge of courage and remembers a spell. "Get back! Crawl away, Apophis. You are defeated by the power of Ra and the words of Osiris." In the darkness of the spiritual realm, we imagine this confrontation. The Ba takes the form of a man brandishing a spear of light, perhaps personifying the very spell he spoke, and the giant serpent recoils, bound and knotted by invisible chains of magic. Apophis is rendered helpless, at least for now, and Nebuchadnezzar's soul sails on unharmed. The Book of the Dead's pictorial scenes match these trials. On Nebuchadnezzar's scroll, a painted image shows a small human figure, labelled with his name in hieroglyphs, standing boldly before a writhing serpent while gods hold the creature down with knives. This image, charged with magical intent, was not mere art, but part of the arsenal given to Nebuchadnezzar. The Egyptians believed that by depicting the soul's triumph over threats, they helped ensure that outcome. The pictures would come alive for the soul in the Duat, providing a visual roadmap and a source of supernatural aid. Every figure drawn on the papyrus, every monster or deity, serves a purpose, either as a challenge to overcome or a protector to call upon. The tomb and scroll were a miniaturized cosmos, a script that the soul could follow and enact on its way to eternity. As Nebuchadnezzar's BR presses on, hour by hour through the night, it encounters more trials. There are roaring rivers of fire that must be crossed. He uses a spell to part the flames as Horus did, and walks through untouched. A lake of boiling water teems with foul beings. Nebuchadnezzar's bar simply flies over it, invoking the transformation spell that allows him to take the form of a falcon. He passes through 12 gates, each representing 1 hour of the night that the sun god Ra himself traverses. At each gate, fearsome gatekeepers challenge him with riddles or demand secret names. Thanks to the meticulous preparations, Nebuchadnezzar answers every question correctly. When asked, "Who are you?" at the 5th gate, he responds with a learned incantation, "I am Osiris Nebuchadnezzar, victorious. I have come with the authority of the gods. I know the secret name of this gate, Sprayer of Flame. I quench its flame with the water of my truth." The gate swings open and the guardians bow, letting him pass. But the embalmed one carries more than just words. He carries the essence of protection that was layered onto his physical form. Remember those tiny amulets tucked between bandages, the scarab over his heart, the eye of Horus on his wound, the jed pillar along his spine. In the Duat, these amulets shine like beacons around Nebuchadnezzar. If a demon of darkness approaches, the Eye of Horus amulet manifests as a brilliant, all-seeing eye hovering beside Nebuchadnezzar, repelling the demon's shadow. If a collapsing tunnel looms, the Djed pillar appears as a sturdy column of light, supporting the roof and ensuring Nebuchadnezzar's safe passage. There is even a small wax figurine of a servant that was placed in his tomb goods. In the Duat, it comes alive as a helpful guide, leading Nebuchadnezzar down the correct fork when the roads of night branch confusingly. In these ways, the care lavished on his mummy translates into real advantages for his soul. In the twisting corridors of the underworld, Nebuchadnezzar might see spirits of others who failed the journey, lost souls caught in traps or groaning in despair. But he moves with purpose, protected by the efficiency of his mummification and the potency of his spells. Eventually, after what seems an epic odyssey, he arrives at the most critical destination of all, the Hall of Ma'at, also called the Hall of Two Truths, where the judgment of the dead takes place. It is a vast hall in the vision of the Egyptians, with lofty columns and the thrones of the gods of the underworld arrayed in grandeur. Osiris sits upon his golden throne as judge, regal and immobile, wrapped in his own first mummy bands, wearing the Atef crown of Upper Egypt. Before him stands a great balance scale. At one end of the hall, Anubis gently takes Nebuchadnezzar's heart, which has been magically summoned forth from the mummy's chest, or, symbolically, a heart scarab amulet representing it, and places it on the scale's left pan. On the opposite pan, Ma'at's feather of truth lies pristine and weightless. The assembled deities, the 42 judges of the dead, watch closely. Thoth, the ibis-headed scribe god, stands ready to record the outcome on his scroll. This is the moment Nebuchadnezzar's entire life and all the elaborate preparations have been building toward. If his heart is heavy with evil, laden with a lifetime of lies, crimes and impure deeds, it will weigh more than the feather, and his soul will be found unworthy. In that case, the fate is dire. A fearsome creature named Amit, part crocodile, part lion, part hippopotamus, waits hungrily beside the scales. Should the heart prove impure, Amit will lunge forward and devour it, condemning Nebuchadnezzar to the second death of oblivion. But Nebuchadnezzar has lived a decent life, and moreover his bandages and amulets have been whispering encouragement and spells to his heart this whole journey, reminding it to be light, to be free of burden. The heart scarab amulet placed on his chest bore the inscription, "O my heart, rise not up against me as a witness. Do not oppose me in the tribunal. That spell ensures Nebuchadnezzar's heart does not betray him by crying out guilt. Thoth's voice rings out, the scales are balanced. This man's heart is light and true. Indeed, the tiny pointer on the scale quivers and comes to rest at perfect equilibrium. Nebuchadnezzar's heart and the feather are equal. A collective murmur of approval passes through the hall. Nebuchadnezzar has been declared Ma Keru, true of voice, or vindicated. Osiris then speaks in a deep voice that resounds like the shifting of earth. Nebuchadnezzar, justified in Ma'at, you have passed the test. Enter into the afterlife, renewed and everlasting. Welcome, O Osiris Nebuchadnezzar, to your place among the blessed. In the poetic words of one ancient funerary text, a blessed soul at this point receives fields in the field of reeds, and a star in the sky is given to him. Nebuchadnezzar is, metaphorically and spiritually, allotted his own plot of the divine estate, a piece of the ever-fertile fields of Aru where he may live in joy, and a fixed star in the heavens, ensuring his soul will shine for eternity. The promise of the bandages and amulets has come true. His flesh is preserved as one who never died, and now he is numbered among the imperishable stars. Nebuchadnezzar's transformation into an ark, an effective spirit, or shining one, is now complete. The ark is essentially the union of his Ba and Ka after passing judgment, a blessed spirit that can dwell with the gods. Often the ark was thought to literally shine as a star or a transfigured being of light. Nebuchadnezzar's Ach steps forward, free of the burdens of mortal flesh, yet supported by the existence of that flesh preserved in his tomb. Osiris extends a hand in the mythic vision, and Nebuchadnezzar joins the company of the justified. The assembled gods offer him a welcome and perhaps a sip from a vessel of cool water, the water of life. Now Nebuchadnezzar enters the field of reeds, a paradisiacal reflection of Egypt. In this realm, the Nile's waters flow gently and eternally. The sky is always golden with sunrise or pink with sunset, never the dark of oblivion, and the fields yield bountiful crops without toil. There we see Nebuchadnezzar again in a new setting. Just as his tomb paintings anticipated, he finds a plot of land to call his own and perhaps spends his days pleasantly doing what he enjoyed in life. If he was a farmer, maybe he supervises the growth of wheat that stands taller and fuller than any on earth, and he reaps it alongside his father or grandfather who passed before him. If he was a scribe or loved reading, perhaps he spends time in an eternal library of the gods, writing down new wisdom on scrolls that never decay. Loved ones who went before are there to greet him. Think of a joyous family reunion, but in an idyllic, never-ending countryside. His wife, if she is still alive back on earth, her Ba might visit him in dreams, or he might patiently wait for her eventual arrival. If she died before him, she's here to embrace him now. Every wholesome pleasure is available: music, companionship, food, without scarcity or indigestion, and the presence of the gods themselves who occasionally mingle with the blessed souls. Nebuchadnezzar's preserved body, sealed in its tomb, serves as a point of connection that will allow him to periodically return to earth to receive offerings and to unite with his Ka each night. But essentially, his journey to an eternal life has succeeded. Thanks to the bandages that kept his body intact and the spells they contained, he recognized himself, he overcame the terrors of the Duat, and he was found worthy by the divine tribunal. Ultimately, why did the ancient Egyptians wrap their dead in bandages? The entire saga of Nebuchadnezzar illuminates the answer. They did it to create a bridge between life and eternity. The bandages preserved the body, yes, But more than that, they preserved identity, memory, and hope. Each strip of linen was a physical prayer, each resin coating a shield against oblivion, each amulet a pledge of safe passage. The Egyptians were a people intoxicated with the idea that life, good life, righteous life, should last forever. So they marshalled all their ingenuity, their art, their spiritual lore to ensure it would be so. Ultimately, the ancient Egyptians' practice of wrapping their dead in bandages shows a breathtaking confidence in the face of death. It was their grand answer to the existential dread of oblivion. They could not bear the thought of life's end being absolute, so they conceived a beautiful, elaborate means to deny oblivion its victory. Each layer of linen, each prayer and amulet was an act of defiance, a statement that love and memory can triumph over decay and silence. This ritual reveals how deeply they understood the power of remembrance. As long as the body remained intact and the name was spoken, a person was never truly gone. In preserving the body, they were preserving the story, the personality, the very essence of a human being. And isn't that, at heart, what all of us desire? To not vanish without a trace, to be remembered, to have some part of us live on? Looking back across the ages, we find that the Egyptians did achieve a form of immortality through these practices. Their mummies still exist, their monuments still stand, and their names, Ramesses, Nefertari, Tutankhamun, and millions of others less famous, are still read and spoken today. Their voices echo in every museum and history book, a chorus from 3,000 years ago that says, "We were here. We loved life, we feared oblivion, we hoped for eternity, and we did not surrender to death." In our own modern ways, through memories we keep of loved ones, through monuments we build, through stories and digital legacies, we strive for the same goal. The details differ, but the dream is the same, that something of us, like a star in the night, will shine on after we are gone. In the silent darkness of Neighbor Maket's sealed tomb, one might imagine a serene stillness. The last flicker of lamplight has died out, the offerings lie in quiet rows, the mummy rests in state. But that darkness is not emptiness, it is the incubator of eternity. Within that linen cocoon lies the triumph of a people's belief. Perhaps if we let our hearts conjure the scene, we can envision Neighbor Maket's spirit standing beside his own wrapped form, looking upon it with a smile. He knows that this carefully swathed body will keep him anchored for all time. He knows that because of the bandages, the chants, and the love that enveloped him, he will never be truly lost. And in that knowledge he turns and steps into the field of reeds, greeted by the rising sun of a new dawn. The ancient Egyptians wrapped their dead in bandages, not because they denied the reality of death, but because they refused to accept the finality of it. They loved life too much to let it slip away without a fight. In their delicate linens and protective amulets, they wove a bridge between the now and the forever. And as long as we continue to marvel at their work and retell their story, that bridge remains unbroken, the voices of those mummies still whispering to us about an eternal longing to be remembered, and the undying hope that life triumphs over death, night in the desert. A pale moon casts its glow over an ocean of sand rippling to the horizon. In that vast silence, 3 dark silhouettes break the flatness of the earth, colossal triangles etched against the starry sky. These are the pyramids of Giza, brooding and magnificent, their edges still sharp after thousands of years. The desert night is cool, and a gentle wind whispers across the plateau, carrying grains of sand and echoes of an ancient past. In the distance, the lights of modern Cairo flicker, but here at the foot of the pyramids, time stands still. Step closer, feel the ground, hard, packed with millennia of history. Place your hand on a limestone block larger than a car and realize it's just one of millions that form these giants. The stone is cold and inert, yet it hums with a silent story. Overhead, the Milky Way spills across the heavens, and it's easy to imagine that the stars themselves are listening. There's a sense of something eternal here, as if the pyramids were born from the earth at the dawn of time. But they weren't. They were built, stone by stone, by human hands. And that realization that humans once conceived and constructed these mountains of stone is both humbling and electrifying. How did this happen? Where did the pyramids of Egypt come from? It's a question that hangs in the air, as heavy as the stones themselves. Standing here, you can't help but wonder, who were the people that dared to shape eternity with their bare hands? What kind of civilization could project its will onto the landscape in a form so immense, so precise, so mysterious? In the cool hush before dawn, as the first light begins to silver the east, the pyramids loom like hulking guardians of a secret. We seek their origin as if searching for a hidden answer at the heart of the world. The poet Rumi once wrote, "I keep secret in myself an Egypt that doesn't exist." In a way, we all carry an imagined Egypt within us, a land of mystery and golden light, of pharaohs and forgotten knowledge. The pyramids stand as ambassadors of that imagined Egypt. For centuries they've beguiled explorers, scientists, conquerors, and dreamers. We project onto them our fantasies of lost wisdom, extraterrestrial architects, or spiritual revelations. Yet the true story of the pyramids is no less fascinating than the myths. It's a story written in sand and stone, in sweat and genius, in faith and ambition. It spans thousands of years and countless lives. It is the story we are about to explore, a journey across time, through the rise of a culture and the march of innovation, through the realm of mythology and the cutting edge of modern science, all centered on these ageless monuments. As the sun's first rays break over the eastern horizon, the cap of Khufu's Great Pyramid catches fire with light. For an instant it gleams as it once did when it was sheathed in polished white limestone and topped with a golden capstone. Imagine that moment, sunrise in ancient Egypt, the pyramidion blazing like a star fallen to earth, flooding the plateau with morning glow. To those who built it, this was more than a tomb. It was a resurrection machine, a stairway to the heavens, a statement to the universe that a great king had joined the company of gods. To us, it is a portal into deep history and an enduring riddle. Our journey begins at the foot of this radiant monument, but to truly answer the question, where did the pyramids come from, we must travel further back to a time before these stones were stacked, before Egypt was even a unified kingdom. We must trace the pyramids' lineage through archaeology, engineering, history, mythology, and philosophy. We will walk alongside ancient architects and labourers, peer into the minds of pharaohs and priests, weigh the evidence of modern science and the echoes of ancient texts. We will also wander the fringes of speculation, those captivating alternative theories, to see what they offer and what they lack. And finally, we'll reflect on why these monuments still captivate us, what they say about human ambition, memory, and our eternal quest to touch the heavens. The vast silence of the desert is about to be broken by a story nearly as old as civilization itself. To find the origin of the pyramids, we journey back over 5,000 years, long before the first pyramid rose from the desert. We find ourselves on the banks of the Nile around 3200 BC. The air is hot and still, buzzing with dragonflies. Along the river, clusters of reed huts form villages, where people tend small fields of barley and emmer wheat. This is pre-dynastic Egypt, a patchwork of tribes and communities slowly coalescing into something greater. The Nile is their lifeblood. Every year its floods renew the soil, turning desert into green abundance. In this crucible of sun, water, and rich black earth, one of the world's first great civilizations is taking shape. Imagine a traveller walking along the Nile in those days. He would pass fishermen casting nets in the shallows, farmers coaxing melons and figs from the ground, potters and weavers plying their crafts. He might see sacred rituals to local gods, perhaps an offering at a simple shrine to ensure the flood's return, or a procession honouring the falcon or jackal, deities that would later populate Egypt's pantheon. Life follows the rhythms of the river and the seasons. And yet, something new is stirring. Over generations, villages band together into districts, and districts into proto-kingdoms. Competition and warfare flare between them, and out of this contest emerges leadership, chieftains with ambition and divine claims. These early rulers begin to think beyond the next harvest, beyond their village, toward a legacy that will endure. One of the earliest forms of legacy is the tomb. Even in the pre-dynastic era, Egyptians take great care with their dead. In shallow grave pits dug into the desert sand, bodies are interred in fetal position with pots of food, beads, stone pallets for grinding cosmetics, provisions and comforts for life beyond death. These humble burials are the seeds of an idea that one's resting place can be a kind of vessel for immortality. Over time, as society grows more stratified and wealth accumulates, tombs become more elaborate. By around 3000 BC, local chieftains in Upper Egypt, the southern Nile Valley, are building larger sepulchres, mud brick chambers beneath low mounds, sometimes marked by standing stones or simple mastabas, bench-like mud structures. They reflect a belief that will ultimately drive pyramid building, the conviction that death is not an end but a transition, and that the dead require monumental care to facilitate their new life. Around 3100 BC, a momentous event unfolds. Egypt becomes one nation. Tradition tells of a king named Narmer, often identified with the semi-legendary Menz, who unified the two lands of Upper and Lower Egypt, forging one of the world's first nation-states. Whether it was Narmer alone or a series of kings, by the dawn of the first dynasty, the pharaoh stands as the divine ruler of a domain stretching hundreds of miles along the Nile. With unity comes centralized power and the ability to marshal resources on a grand scale. The kings of the first and second dynasties, circa 3100 to 2700 BC, establish a capital at Memphis, near the apex of the Nile Delta. They also establish the pattern of royal burial that will evolve dramatically in the centuries ahead. In the desert sands of Abydos in the south, these early pharaohs are laid to rest in tomb complexes that are the largest of their time. Broad rectangular pits lined with brick or wood, topped by mounds, and surrounded by enclosures. Some even include the graves of servants sacrificed to serve the king in the afterlife, a sobering and telling testament to royal authority. Meanwhile, just south of Memphis at Saqqara, the pharaoh's high officials are interred in mastabas, massive rectangular tombs of mud brick with sloping sides and flat roofs, built above subterranean burial chambers. These mastabas stand perhaps 3 to 6 meters tall, like squat platforms. They are, in effect, precursors of the pyramid. The word mastaba in Arabic means bench, and these structures indeed resemble benches of eternity upon which the spirits could rest. Within their simple form lies the germ of a revolutionary idea, that one could stack one monument atop another, rising higher toward the sky. By 2700 BC, Egyptian architects have mastered mud brick construction and are experimenting with stone for decorative elements and small shrines. But no one has yet tried to build a monument entirely of stone or to reach truly soaring heights. That is about to change under a visionary pharaoh of the 3rd dynasty. Travel now to Saqqara around 2650 BC. The sun blazes high and white in the sky as a crowd of workers assembles on a rocky rise overlooking the Nile Valley. King Djoser stands apart in a linen kilt and cap crown, and beside him his vizier and chief architect, a man whose name will echo through history, Imhotep. Before them rises something the world has never seen, a pyramid. Not a smooth, sharp pyramid as we know from Giza, but a stack of 6 giant limestone steps, each layer smaller than the one below, forming a tall staircase of stone. Originally, Djoser's tomb was likely planned as a traditional mastaba, a large square platform, but something inspired Imhotep to push the design further, to literally stack innovation upon innovation. They built the mastaba of finely cut local limestone instead of the usual mud brick, already a bold break with tradition. Then they made it bigger, expanding it on all 4 sides. Then, daringly, they added another mastaba-like layer on top of the first, and another above that. The structure grew in stages into a towering wedding cake of stone, climbing nearly 62 meters, 203 feet, into the sky. It became the Step Pyramid of Djoser, the world's first large-scale stone monument and, essentially, the first pyramid. Imagine the awe of the workers and courtiers watching this form emerge, rising far above the flat desert. Nothing of this size had ever been attempted at a time when most buildings were 1 or 2 stories tall. Here was a structure dwarfing the landscape, visible for miles. To the ancient Egyptians, height was an expression of sacredness. The tops of mountains or tall obelisks were closer to the gods. Djoser's pyramid, with its series of steps, was conceived as a stairway to the heavens, a literal means for the pharaoh to climb to join the sun and stars. Its shape echoed that of a primeval mound. In Egyptian creation myth, the world began as a mound of earth emerging from the infinite flood. Now Djoser's pyramid became that mound, symbolically reenacting creation and providing a perch from which the king's spirit would leap to the celestial realm. The Step Pyramid was not a standalone structure in an empty desert. Imhotep designed an entire funerary complex around it, a grand stage for the king's afterlife rites. Encircling the pyramid was a massive rectangular enclosure wall of white limestone, nearly 10 meters high and punctuated by mock doorways and real entrances, giving the illusion of a palace facade. Inside this 37-acre enclosure lay courtyards, temples, chapels, and colonnaded corridors. There were altars for sacrifice and dummy buildings sculpted in stone, perhaps to house the king's spirit and the gods who would accompany him. One courtyard contained stone pillars and platforms for the Hebsed festival, a jubilee ritual meant to renew the pharaoh's vitality. Imhotep provided for Djoser to continue celebrating jubilees even in death. The entire complex forms a miniature city of stone for the deceased king. At its heart, the Step Pyramid towered, originally clad in smooth white limestone that must have shone under the desert sun. We can picture the completion ceremony, Djoser, aging but proud, in his royal regalia, standing in the courtyard before the gleaming pyramid as the final casing stones are set in place atop the highest step. Priests in white robes chant prayers to Ra, the sun god, and to the sky goddess, Nut. Incense burns, wafting fragrant smoke that mingles with the dry desert air. Perhaps Djoser himself ascends part way up the steps in a ritual, symbolically climbing toward the heavens to claim his eternal place. The assembled nobles and workers cheer, marveling that they have built a mountain. In that moment, the pyramidal form proves its power. A new idea has taken root in the Egyptian imagination, that a king's tomb can be a man-made mountain, a meeting point of earth and sky. Djoser's step pyramid was an astonishing success. It not only secured Djoser's memory for eons to come, indeed even in later eras Egyptians remembered and honoured Djoser, and Imhotep was eventually deified as a patron of wisdom, but it also ignited a pyramid-building fervour among subsequent kings. The genie was out of the bottle. If one step pyramid could confer such glory and divine connection, might not a larger, more refined pyramid do even more? The rest of the Third Dynasty saw a couple of attempts. For example, Pharaoh Sekhemkhet began a step pyramid at Saqqara, left unfinished, and another pharaoh started one at Zawiet el-Aryan that never rose beyond its base. These projects suggest that Djoser's successors were keen to replicate his monument. Little did they know the challenges and innovations that lay ahead. The road to the Great Pyramid, and indeed to answering where the pyramids came from, would run through a period of feverish experimentation in design and engineering. The age of pyramids had dawned, and there was no turning back. We step forward a few decades to the reign of Sneferu, around 2600 BC, at the dawn of the Fourth Dynasty. Sneferu is a name that later Egyptians would remember with a kind of affectionate awe. He was known as a benevolent king and, notably, as the master builder of pyramids. Under Sneferu, pyramid building truly comes into its own through bold trial and error. If Djoser's step pyramid was the proof of concept, Sneferu's reign is the great workshop in which the pyramid's final form is perfected. Picture Egypt in Sneferu's time, a prosperous, optimistic nation under a capable and charismatic pharaoh. The capital Memphis bustles with activity, scribes tallying grain, craftsmen fashioning fine jewellery and statuary, priests performing daily temple rituals to keep the gods content. Sneferu likely commanded more resources and manpower than any previous king, and he was determined to use them to create monuments that would outshine his predecessors. His architects inherited the knowledge of Imhotep's step pyramid, but Sneferu had an even more ambitious vision, a true pyramid with smooth, angled sides. The challenge was immense. No one had ever attempted to build a continuously sloping pyramid before. The step pyramid's terrace-like profile was easier to stabilize. To get from a step design to a flat-faced one might seem straightforward. Fill in the steps, smooth it over, but in practice it was a leap into unknown engineering territory. Sneferu, however, was undaunted. Remarkably, he embarked on not one but 3 major pyramid projects during his reign, effectively turning Egypt into an open-air research and development centre for pyramid construction. The first of Sneferu's pyramids rose at a place called Maidum, about 100 kilometres south of modern Cairo. It appears to have begun under his predecessor, possibly King Huni, as a 7-step pyramid. Sneferu's builders decided to transform it. They added an 8th step and then filled in the steps with angled limestone casing to create a smooth-faced pyramid. For a time, Maidum stood as the first true pyramid, but disaster struck. At some point, perhaps during construction or maybe years later, the outer casing and parts of the upper masonry collapsed, sloughing off and leaving only the inner core standing. Today, Maidum looks like a strange stone tower rising from a rubble mound, the collapsed pyramid. What went wrong? Likely the angle was too steep, about 51.5 degrees, and the underlying structure not keyed in strongly enough. When the outer layers were added, their weight may have caused the whole thing to destabilize. Meidum was a costly lesson that building a smooth pyramid required new solutions in structural engineering. Sneferu was not discouraged by the setback at Meidum. If anything, he was spurred to try again with improvements. He shifted his attention northward to Dahshur, a broad desert plain not far south of Saqqara, and there he launched an even grander pyramid. This is the famous Bent Pyramid. It started rising with a steep slope of 54 degrees, similar to what Meidum had attempted. The pyramid climbed to about 49 meters high when the builders began noticing alarming signs: cracks in the casing, instability in the structure's lower parts. The weight of millions of stones was creating dangerous stresses. In a brilliant feat of problem-solving, Sneferu's architects changed the design mid-course. Roughly halfway up, they abruptly reduced the angle from 54 degrees to about 43 degrees. As a result, the pyramid's profile bends. It starts steep, then becomes shallower toward the top, giving it a distinct bent appearance. This compromise ensured the pyramid could be completed without collapsing. When finished, the bent pyramid stood about 97 meters, 318 feet, tall. Uniquely, much of its original polished limestone casing remains intact today, especially on the lower slopes, allowing us to see a pyramid almost as it looked in Sneferu's time, its white sides still smooth after 4.5 millennia. Imagine being present at Dahshur as Sneferu's bent pyramid neared completion. Perhaps there's initial dismay that it didn't turn out as a straight-edged pyramid. One can picture court observers whispering, "It looks a bit odd." But, more importantly, it stood solidly. The shift in angle solved the structural crisis. Workers who had feared another collapse could now breathe a sigh of relief. Sneferu, pragmatic and forward-looking, likely took pride in the ingenuity displayed. His builders had essentially invented on the fly a new form. The bent pyramid, in fact, is a fascinating transitional monument. It teaches by its very form. It whispers of lessons learned. Don't build too steep, adjust and adapt. And it was still a highly impressive edifice, gleaming in the sun, its dual slope shape perhaps even seen as purposeful by some. Some theories suggest it might represent 2 stages of the sun's journey, or 2 conjoined pyramids symbolizing Upper and Lower Egypt, though it's more likely simply an engineering necessity turned an aesthetic. Sneferu wasn't content with good enough, though. Even as the bent pyramid was being finished, he embarked on his 3rd pyramid at Dahshur, a few kilometers to the north. This time, armed with knowledge from his previous attempts, he and his team played it safe. They designed the entire pyramid at the gentler 43-degree angle from the start. This is the Red Pyramid, named for the reddish hue of its limestone core blocks, now exposed. With its lower slope, it could be built much larger in base. The Red Pyramid's base spans about 220 meters per side, nearly as broad as the Great Pyramid's base, though because of the moderate angle its height reached only about 105 meters, 344 feet. It was completed smoothly, without drama, and stands today as the world's first successfully completed true smooth-sided pyramid. Once, it too was encased in gleaming white limestone, and though most of that casing was later plundered, the pyramid's shape is intact, a near-perfect triangle against the desert sky. Envision Sneferu in his later years, perhaps standing on a pavilion viewing the Red Pyramid when it was finished. By now he's an old king, but one who has seen his vision realized. Before him lies a perfect pyramid, its sides meeting at a point, symbolizing the sun's rays solidified. Sneferu had done it. In one reign he built more pyramid volume than perhaps all other pharaohs combined. The Meidum, though ruined, the Bent, and the Red. He pioneered techniques for large-scale stone construction, experimented, stumbled, and ultimately succeeded. Later, Egyptians revered him as a wise and beneficent ruler. Perhaps part of that reputation came from the notion that he cared enough to perfect the craft of eternal homes for the kings, sparing his successors the trial and error. Indeed, the knowledge gleaned in Sneferu's reign set the stage for the pinnacle of pyramid building to come. Standing at Dashur amid Sneferu's two giant pyramids, the bent pyramid with its peculiar shape and the red pyramid with its classic form, one can feel the momentum building in our story. The Egyptians now have the know-how to erect mountains of stone at will. They've solved problems of angle, weight distribution, and construction method. The baton is about to pass to Sneferu's son, who will inherit a kingdom at peak capability. The stage is set for the most famous pyramid of all, a project of such scale and ambition that it would not only break records of height and mass, but also create a legend that echoes through all subsequent history. The Great Pyramid of Giza is on the horizon. And so we arrive at the most iconic chapter in this story, the building of the Great Pyramid at Giza. The time is around 2550 BC. King Khufu, whom the Greeks later called Cheops, Sneferu's son, has taken the throne. He inherits the fruits of his father's experiments and a well-oiled state apparatus ready to undertake greatness. Khufu's own ambition is towering. Perhaps inspired by his father's multiple pyramids, he aims to build one pyramid that will surpass them all, an eternal monument to his reign and to Egypt's might. The site chosen is Giza, a plateau of bedrock on the west bank of the Nile, not far from Memphis. Giza is essentially a limestone outcrop, elevated and enduring, a symbolic spot for a monument meant to last forever. It offers a solid foundation to bear tremendous weight. To the east of Giza, the Nile's green valley unfurls, and beyond it, Memphis and the Delta. To the west stretches the Sahara. In the Egyptian mindset, east, where the sun rises, was the land of the living, and west, where the sun sets, was the land of the dead. By situating his pyramid on the west edge of the Nile Valley, Khufu placed his eternal house right at the gateway to the afterlife, where each evening the sun, and by extension the pharaoh's soul, would descend. Practical considerations were ideal too. Immediately to Giza's south and east lay good quality limestone quarries for bulk stone, and the Nile's proximity meant easy transport of materials like the high-grade white limestone from across the river and granite from the distant south. Before building upward, Khufu's engineers had to plan and prepare. They carefully surveyed the site. Remarkably, the base of the Great Pyramid is almost a perfect square, and it's aligned nearly exactly to the cardinal points, true north, south, east, west. The level of precision is astonishing. The sides of the square base differ in length by mere centimetres, and it's oriented to within 1/4 of a degree of true north. How did an ancient society achieve this without compasses or GPS? They likely used the stars and the sun. One theory suggests they observed a particular star, perhaps in the Big Dipper or Orion, at the moment it crossed the meridian, the imaginary north-south line in the sky, using a merket, a sighting tool with a plumb line, and aligning two such tools to bracket a star's path. They could pinpoint north. Another method might have been tracking the shadow of the sun at noon or using water-filled trenches to create a perfectly level reference, and then sighting the sun's rising setting at equinox to get an east-west line. Whatever the exact methods, the surveyors of Khufu displayed incredible skill. They levelled the rocky ground by cutting it down in high spots and building it up in low spots. Some evidence of perimeter post holes and trenches suggests they may have flooded a grid of channels with water to detect high points, essentially using water as a giant spirit level. When the foundation was ready, it was probably accurate to within a few millimeters over its entire 13-acre expanse. With the site prepared, construction began. Imagine the scene. Thousands of labourers converging on Giza. They set up a vast camp, a city of workers, on the plateau or perhaps near the cultivation line by the river. There are quarrymen slicing out limestone blocks with copper chisels and wooden mallets, leaving behind the short stepped scars that can still be seen in the Giza quarry pits. Other teams ferry these blocks on sledges to the building site. Sledges creak and groan under the loads. Gangs of men haul them with ropes, likely chanting in unison to coordinate the pull. Supervisors shout instructions, dust swirls, pulleys squeak, and ramps of packed earth and brick begin to form against the rising structure. Nearby, at the Nile's edge, a fleet of boats delivers precious materials. From the east bank comes fine Tura limestone, gleaming white, intended for the outer casing, loaded on barges during the inundation season and floated to Giza via a purpose-dug canal into a harbour that may have existed right by the pyramid complex. From hundreds of kilometres upriver in Aswan come shipments of granite, enormous blocks destined for the king's burial chamber and internal passages. Each granite block might weigh 50 to 80 tons, so heavy that special barges and clever towing strategies are needed. A recently discovered papyrus diary of an official named Mera gives us a glimpse of this process. Mera records how his crew in year 27 of Khufu's reign transported stones from Tura in the east to Giza, describing the loading of cargo and the handoff to the construction site overseer, who was none other than Khufu's half-brother, Ankaf. This fragile ancient logbook confirms what long had been assumed. An organised supply chain by river was the artery feeding the pyramid project. The workforce itself is not a horde of toiling slaves under the lash, as Hollywood often imagined, but rather skilled workers and temporary labourers conscripted from all over Egypt. Archaeology has found at Giza the remains of a workers' city, long galleries where presumably crews slept, bakeries that turned out tens of thousands of loaves of bread, breweries for gallons of beer, butchers' quarters with bones of cattle and goat. The workers ate meat regularly, a sign they were valued, as common folk mostly had grain diets. There were even cemeteries for those who died during the project, buried honourably near the sacred site, something no slave would receive. Hieroglyphic graffiti left on blocks deep inside the pyramid record the names of work gangs like the Friends of Khufu or the Drunkards of Menkaure, often accompanied by jovial titles or slogans. These informal markings show a sense of camaraderie and pride among the builders. These people were likely farmers and villagers fulfilling labour duty during the flood season, when their fields were underwater and idle, a sort of national service that also put food and beer on their tables, courtesy of the royal ration, and connected them to something greater, the divine mission of building the king's eternal home. How did they actually raise this colossal structure, step by step? The pyramid began as a broad platform, and layer by layer it climbed. Archaeologists and engineers surmise that ramps were the key. Perhaps a long straight ramp of rubble and mud was built abutting one side, up which sledges could be dragged by teams of men or oxen. As the pyramid grew taller, the ramp grew longer and higher. It could have been a single massive ramp, though that would become unwieldy and might itself have used as much material as the pyramid. Another possibility is a system of zigzagging ramps on one face, or a spiral ramp corkscrewing upward around the pyramid's flanks. There is evidence at other pyramid sites, like a curious unfinished spiral ramp around the base of an earlier pyramid at Meidum, and ramp remains at Karnak and in quarries, that point to various ramp strategies. Some modern theorists, like French architect Jean-Pierre Houdin, have even proposed an internal ramp, a tunnel-like path built inside the pyramid structure, climbing upward and opening at corners for turning the blocks. Interestingly, a notch in the Great Pyramid's northeast corner and some voids detected by microgravity scans could hint at something like that. On the lower courses, construction was easier. Multiple teams could work simultaneously on different parts of the perimeter, and blocks could be dragged relatively short distances up modest ramps. But as the pyramid rose, the logistics became more demanding. Perhaps the builders switched to a combination of smaller ramps and platforms. We can imagine a lively, almost industrial scene. On the pyramid's broad terraces, gangs lever blocks into position with wooden levers and stone counterweights. At any given time, hundreds of blocks might be in motion, some being pried into precise alignment, the fine-tuning done by trimming the stone in place and using a bit of gypsum mortar to bed it level. Others being hauled up ramps by straining groups chanting "Hep, Hep" in rhythm. Sledges might glide more easily if the path was lubricated. Egyptian art indeed shows a person pouring water in front of a sledge bearing a heavy statue to reduce friction. Dust and noise fill the air, mallets striking chisels, foremen calling out, workers singing heave-ho songs. Despite the human bustle, there is meticulous organisation behind it all. The pyramid's design is being executed to astonishing exactness. We know that as they built upward, they maintained the sides' perfect slope and orientation. They may have used taut ropes anchored at the corners to guide the angle of each face, or sighted along the edges from below to ensure straightness. The levelling was checked at each tier. Interior spaces like the ascending passage and chambers had to align properly. The most critical components were the interior chambers and passages. Khufu's architects changed the traditional layout by moving the main burial chamber above ground, within the pyramid body. They first cut a descending passage down into the bedrock under the pyramid, perhaps intending an underground burial chamber initially, which they abandoned. Then they built an ascending passage that leads up into the pyramid's core to the so-called Queen's Chamber at mid-level. Not actually for a queen, it may have been an abandoned burial chamber or held a statue of the king's car. Further up, they constructed the majestic Grand Gallery, an impressive corbel vaulted corridor 8 meters high that slopes upward, perhaps used as a ramp itself to haul the heavy granite blocks for the king's chamber on sledges, then later serving as a grand ascending hall for the soul or for maintenance access. At the top of the Grand Gallery, a narrow passage leads to the king's chamber, smack in the heart of the pyramid. This chamber was lined and roofed with huge granite slabs from Aswan. Incredibly, each ceiling slab weighs about 50 tons. To prevent the chamber from being crushed under the weight of masonry above, the builders stacked 5 hollowed-out stress-relieving compartments above it, capped by a gabled roof of granite beams. Standing inside the king's chamber today, one can see the flat, dark granite ceiling and sense the mass above. It is silent, warm, and awe-inspiring, a technical marvel that it still stands intact. Those invisible little chambers above did their job flawlessly. Herodotus, visiting 2,000 years after Khufu, was told some fantastic things about this pyramid. That it took 20 years and 100,000 workers in rotating crews to build, modern estimates suggest around 20 to 30 years, and a workforce averaging 20,000, with seasonal fluctuation, far fewer than 100,000 at any one time. He also recounted how it was built tier by tier, and that ingenious machines, perhaps levers, lifted stones from one level to the next. Notably, he wrote of an inscription, likely apocryphal, that supposedly recorded the amount of radishes, onions and garlic fed to the labourers, costing 1,600 silver talents, a staggering sum. This detail humanizes the project. Amidst the grand construction, thousands of humans needed to be fed and cared for daily. Indeed, traces of garlic and other foodstuffs have been found at the workers' village, confirming that feeding the builders was a major operation. Imagine those mass meals: bread and beer by the vat, lentil stew, maybe roasted goat on good days, and the sharp scent of garlic, an ancient energy snack, fueling the workers as they hefted blocks. Day after day, year after year, the Great Pyramid climbed skyward. Perhaps around year 15 or 16 of Khufu's reign, the bulk of it was done, and the work shifted to the apex and the fine outer casing. Finally, the moment came to place the capstone, likely a squat little pyramidion of hard stone, granite or perhaps limestone coated in electrum, a gold-silver alloy, so it shone brilliantly. We might picture a small ceremony as that capstone was set. Maybe Khufu was alive to see it, maybe not. Some king lists suggest Khufu ruled about 23 or 24 years, others up to 50, it's not certain. But at some point, the Great Pyramid stood complete, 146.6 meters tall, 481 feet, gleaming white in the sun with a golden top that caught the first light of dawn and the last light of dusk. What a sight it must have been! For nearly 3,800 years, it would hold the title of the tallest human-made structure on Earth, until medieval cathedrals and then the Eiffel Tower surpassed it. Its 4 triangular sides faced the 4 cardinal directions almost perfectly. From a distance, the pyramid might have looked not like steps or blocks, but like 4 flat triangles of pure light meeting at a point, a shape so simple yet, on a scale so grand, it defied belief. Up close, one would see the joints of the casing stones, but barely. The Egyptians fitted those outer stones with hairline precision. Many casing blocks survive near the pyramid's base and at Khafra's pyramid, and the gaps between them are nearly knife-thin. The entire base covers about 13 acres, roughly 7 city blocks, and the sides were so straight that the error margin is only about 0.05%. The whole mass of the pyramid is around 6 million tons, comprising some 2.3 million blocks of stone. It's hard to grasp those figures. Some like to illustrate it this way: the Great Pyramid's volume could form a wall around France 3 meters high, or nowadays you could build about 30 Empire State Buildings with the same volume of material, and all of it moved by human muscle, planning and willpower. When the pyramid was finished, attention turned to the accompanying elements of Khufu's pyramid complex. To the east of the pyramid, they built a mortuary temple where priests would perform daily offerings to the departed king's spirit. A magnificent causeway, essentially a long raised and partly covered roadway, extended from this temple down to the edge of the Nile floodplain, about half a mile. At that lower end stood the Valley Temple, where the king's body would have first been received after being ferried across the Nile from Memphis. Parts of Khufu's causeway are long gone, but causeways of later Giza pyramids had beautiful reliefs, and Khufu's likely did too, perhaps depicting celestial scenes, or the transport of the king's body, or the gods welcoming him. Around the pyramid, subsidiary queens' pyramids popped up, 3 small pyramids to the east for his wives or family, and small mastaba tombs for nobles arranged in neat rows like satellites around a planet. Even boat pits were included, long narrow pits that housed dismantled wooden barges. Astonishingly, 2 such pits on the south side of the Great Pyramid were found to contain nearly intact full-size cedar ships. One of these, often called Khufu's ship, was excavated in the 1950s and reassembled, a 43-metre-long vessel that might have been a ceremonial solar bark for the king's journey with the sun god, or perhaps a vessel to use in the afterlife. It was buried, disassembled, like a model kit waiting to be built in the next world. The Great Pyramid of Khufu, together with the slightly smaller pyramid of Khafra, Khufu's son, and the much smaller pyramid of Menkaure, Khafra's son, form the triad at Giza that has become the postcard of ancient Egypt. Khafra's pyramid, built a generation after Khufu's, originally stood 143.5 meters tall, 471 feet, only about 3 meters shorter than Khufu's, and because it's on higher ground, it still looks almost as tall. Khafra, perhaps wisely, didn't try to outdo his father in size, but did something clever. He incorporated an awe-inspiring guardian into his complex, the Great Sphinx. Carved from a natural spur of bedrock at the foot of his pyramid, the Sphinx has the body of a recumbent lion and the head of a man wearing a pharaoh's Nemes headdress, most likely bearing Khafra's own facial features. At 20 meters tall and 73 meters long, the Sphinx became a symbol of royal power fused with solar imagery, the lion being a symbol of the horizon and the sun. It gazes due east, aligning with the rising sun at the equinoxes. To stand before the Sphinx is to feel the gaze of eternity. Even in Khafra's day, it must have been startling, a stone colossus emerging from the sand, as if the desert itself took form to guard the sacred necropolis. Khafra also built an elegant valley temple of large limestone and granite blocks, where several exquisite statues of himself, in hard diorite stone, showing him protected by Horus the falcon god, were found. His mortuary temple against his pyramid was richly decorated, and a causeway likely connecting the two, perhaps covered to create a mysterious transition from the bustling Nile shore to the sacred pyramid base. Menkaure's pyramid, constructed around 2490 BC, was smaller, originally approximately 65 meters high. Perhaps resources were running thinner, or maybe Menkaure had a shorter reign. He died before fully completing the casing. Interestingly, the lowest courses of Menkaure's pyramid were cased in red granite from Aswan, the rest in white limestone. He might have intended a striking two-tone effect, or simply emphasized the base with costly granite. Menkaure's complex includes 3 little satellite pyramids and his own beautifully sculpted statues. It was during his time that the famous triads of Menkaure with goddesses were made. By the end of the 4th dynasty, around 2465 BC, the Giza Plateau was a veritable city of monuments. The Greeks much later would dub these the pyramids of Cheops, Chephren, and Mycerinus, and count the Great Pyramid among the 7 wonders of the world. Even in ancient Egyptian times, these structures must have inspired reverence. Texts from centuries later hint that rituals and endowments continued at Giza's temples. The Egyptians of later periods looked back on the Pyramid Age as a golden era when kings were mighty and close to the gods. Interestingly, an inscription in the 5th dynasty implies the workers who built Khufu's and Khafra's pyramids were not always fond of those kings. It says that due to the oppressive labour, the people eventually referred to the pyramids by the name of a humble shepherd, Philetis, rather than speak the king's names. This might indicate that while the state glorified the monuments, the common folk whispered their own narratives. Herodotus recounts something similar, that the Egyptians he spoke to around 450 BC remembered Khufu and Khafre as cruel tyrants who closed temples and enslaved labour, a story likely exaggerated or reflecting folk memory of hardship. Meanwhile, Menkaure was remembered as a just and pious king who, according to legend, even halted work on his pyramid to ease his people's burdens. In any case, the pyramid-building fervour began to wane after Giza. The 5th dynasty kings, starting around 2465 BC, still built pyramids at sites like Abusir and Saqqara, but on a smaller scale. The focus shifted in some ways. These later pyramids were lower. Sahur's pyramid, for example, was about 48 meters tall. Unas's, at the end of the 5th dynasty, only about 43 meters. They weren't pushing for sheer mass. Rather, they invested in elaborate temple decorations and a remarkable innovation: inscribed funerary texts. In King Unas's pyramid, circa 2345 BC, for the first time the walls of the burial chamber and corridors were covered in hieroglyphic spells, the pyramid texts. These are incantations, hymns, and instructions to help the king navigate the afterlife, to resurrect and join the gods. Unas's pyramid is tiny compared to Khufu's, but inside, carved into the stone, are profound utterances like, "O King, you are this great star, the companion of Orion, who traverses the sky with Orion, who navigates the Duat with Osiris. May your soul stand among the imperishable stars, your power undiminished for eternity." These texts are the earliest religious writings known, and they reveal explicitly what the great silent pyramids of the 4th dynasty implied: that the pyramid was a launch pad for the soul, that the king aimed to ascend to the sky, perhaps becoming a star, and to accompany the sun god on his daily voyage. The 6th dynasty continued in this vein. Pharaohs like Teti, Pepi I, and Pepi II built modest pyramids. Pepi II's was about 52 meters tall, at South Saqqara, but they all featured pyramid texts on their interiors. Significantly, by this time, 2200s BC, the centralized power of the pharaoh was weakening. Pepi II, according to tradition, ruled over 90 years, a record, but by the end of his reign the country's governance had faltered. The first intermediate period ensued, a time of decentralization and relative chaos, circa 2180 to 2050 BC. During this period, large royal projects like pyramid building virtually ceased. The grandeur of the Old Kingdom Pyramid Age had passed, leaving its monuments standing as giant reminders in the desert, while petty warlords and famine troubled the land. But Egypt eventually reunified around 2050 BC under the Middle Kingdom, and with this Renaissance came a brief revival of pyramid construction. The Middle Kingdom pharaohs, like those of Dynasty 12, circa 1990 to 1800 BC, looked back to the Old Kingdom for inspiration and legitimacy. Kings such as Amenemhat-Shuk, Senusret-Thur, and their successors did build pyramids for themselves, but with some differences. These later pyramids, at sites like Lisht, Dashur, again, Hawara, and Ilahun, were often made with a core of mud brick or a loose fill of sand and debris, and only an outer casing of stone. They tended to be smaller, in the range of 30 to 70 meters high originally, and have not aged as well. Many are now little more than eroded mounds, because once their limestone casing was removed in antiquity, the mud brick core weathered away. However, one Middle Kingdom pyramid, Amenemhat III's pyramid at Hawara, became famous in antiquity for an associated structure, the so-called labyrinth, a sprawling complex of courts and chambers that Herodotus described with admiration, claiming it surpassed even the pyramids. This labyrinth was likely a grand mortuary temple and administrative centre. Its remains suggest a dense grid of rooms which must have seemed like a maze to visitors. Middle Kingdom pyramids continued to feature texts, by then coffin texts, an evolution of pyramid texts, and later the Book of the Dead were used by non-royals too. But interestingly, by the Middle Kingdom, building pyramids was not exclusively a royal privilege. Some high officials built small pyramids atop their tombs. essentially decorative elements. And an intriguing note, even outside Egypt, the idea of pyramids spread. Centuries later, in what is now Sudan, the kingdom of Kush, or Nubia, adopted Egyptian cultural elements and built many small pyramids, circa 700 BC, 300 AD. Those Nubian pyramids at sites like Meroe and Nuri are much narrower and shorter, 10 to 30 metres tall, but served as tombs for kings and queens of Nubia, showing how the pyramid idea had a long afterlife as a symbol of royalty and connection to Egypt's golden age. By the New Kingdom circa 1550 to 1070 BC, Egyptian pharaohs had changed their burial strategy entirely. They no longer built pyramids, opting instead for hidden rock-cut tombs in the Valley of the Kings in Thebes, modern Luxor. Pyramids were by then seen as beacons that attracted tomb robbers. Indeed, nearly all Old Kingdom and Middle Kingdom pyramids had been plundered long before. However, the pyramid shape still held symbolic resonance. New Kingdom tomb chapels of private individuals sometimes had small pyramidion capstones, and the concept of a pyramid as a symbol of the sun's rays persisted in obelisks and benben stones in temples. The age of the pyramids in terms of building great ones was over by 1600 BC, but the cult of the pyramid endured. The Giza pyramids themselves stood as enduring monuments that later generations couldn't fully comprehend. As centuries rolled on, people forgot precisely how and why these giants were made, and myths grew. Ancient Egyptians of later periods sometimes attributed the pyramids to gods or semi-divine sages from a previous world. In the Greek and Roman era, foreign visitors were astonished by them. Greek historian Herodotus, in 450 BC, devotes pages to the pyramids, repeating what Egyptian priests told him, some truths and some tall tales. One tale he recorded, that Pharaoh Cheops, Khufu, was so oppressive he even prostituted his daughter to fund his pyramid, and that the daughter quietly asked each client for a block of stone and built a smaller pyramid for herself, likely a bit of folklore born from a need to humanize or morally question such an enormous project. Another story was that the pyramids had been built by giants or under the guidance of the god Thoth. Yet another, told by medieval Arabic writers, was that a mythical pre-flood king named Surid built the Giza pyramids to preserve knowledge and treasures against the coming deluge, in effect turning the pyramids into massive stone vaults of ancient wisdom. None of these legends is factual, of course, but they underscore something. The pyramids, from antiquity to today, inspire wonder and speculation. When direct memory faded, imaginative explanation took over. Throughout their long history, the pyramids have been not only monuments, but also mirrors reflecting the psyche of those who regard them. To some they were symbols of kingly pride, to others proof of ancient wisdom, to others still an unsolved riddle of a lost age. And all the while, the pyramids themselves simply endured. They suffered the depredations of stone thieves, especially in the first millennia AD, when casing stones were stripped for lime and building material for nearby Cairo. They felt earthquakes. One in 1303 AD shook loose many casing stones of the Giza pyramids. They were clambered over by adventurers and archaeologists in the 19th century, some of whom blasted new entrances with gunpowder. Yet they remain. The core form of the Great Pyramid is essentially as it was in Khufu's time, minus its smooth outer mantle. The pyramids fulfilled one part of their builders' aspirations. They proved to be far more permanent than the empires that followed. So, from these origins, from small pits in the sand to the Great Pyramid's peak, where did the pyramids come from? They sprang from the imagination and social organization of the early Egyptians. In a span of a few hundred years, driven by a vision of connecting with the eternal, Egyptian kings and their people transformed the landscape of the Nile Valley. They quarried and moved staggering amounts of stone. They devised architectural solutions on the fly. They harnessed religion, art, and manpower into a single purpose. The pyramids came from a culture that dared to make the impossible real. They are, in a sense, stones that grew out of the dreams of a civilization. We have traced the historical timeline of the pyramids, from pre-dynastic beginnings to the height of the Old Kingdom and beyond. But understanding these monuments fully also means asking, how exactly were they built? By what ingenuity did those ancient builders achieve these feats? And why did they devote such colossal effort? What spiritual or symbolic meaning underpinned it? To answer these, we shift perspective from the broad sweep of history to the fine details of engineering and belief. Let's put ourselves in the sandals of an ancient Egyptian engineer now and marvel at the practical genius involved. The engineering of the pyramids is a subject of endless fascination. These structures are not simply heaps of stone. They are carefully planned edifices requiring astounding precision and labour. Modern builders and architects, with all their machinery, still gape at the logistics and accuracy achieved by the pyramid builders. So how did the Egyptians do it, with technology from over 4 millennia ago? First, consider the tools and materials at their disposal. The pyramid builders lived in the Bronze Age. Iron was not yet in use. Their primary metal was copper, and a bit later bronze, an alloy of copper and tin. Copper chisels, awls, and drill bits were employed to cut softer stone like limestone. For hard stones like granite, which copper alone can't easily carve, they relied on human cleverness. They used pounding tools made of even harder stone, balls or dolerite pounders to pulverize the rock surface, and abrasives like sand. Sand is essentially quartz, and quartz can wear away granite. To drill holes in granite for inserting wooden wedges, they likely used copper tube drills with a slurry of sand and water as the abrasive. To saw granite, a copper saw blade, no teeth, with sand could slowly grind its way through. Archaeologists have found half-cut granite blocks with narrow saw kerfs and circular drill cores with spiral grooves left by this method. Evidence of these ancient techniques. It was slow but effective given patience and manpower. For moving heavy blocks, the Egyptians had no pulleys or motorized winches, but they had the inclined plane, the lever, and the roller in the form of rolling logs or round balls beneath sledges. Ramps, as we've discussed, provided the gradual incline over which weight could be dragged upwards. Wooden sledges were a crucial piece of tech, basically sled platforms that heavy objects sat on, which teams could tug with ropes. An Egyptian tomb painting from a later period famously shows 172 men pulling a colossal statue on a sledge, while one person stands at the front pouring water on the ground, presumably to reduce friction and help the sledge glide. This is presumably how they moved many pyramid blocks as well. They also likely used ropes and levers extensively. Good rope can multiply force when wrapped around things or used in systems of pulleys. Even if the pulley wasn't a wheel but a smooth post, one can still rig a block and tackle in a rudimentary way. Using wooden levers under a block, a few men can lift or pry it up enough to slide rollers or smaller blocks under, thus jacking it incrementally. The builders could then build up temporary scaffolds of brick or stone beneath to support raised blocks. Surveying and planning were done with remarkable accuracy, using surprisingly simple instruments. The merket, which is basically a sighting rod with a plumb line to indicate vertical and align with stars, and the gnomon, a simple rod used to track shadows. They had a tool called the A-frame level, 2 wooden beams forming an A with a plumb line hanging from the apex, When the plumb line hit a marked center point on the crossbar, the base was level. Using such devices, they could level broad areas by testing multiple points. They measured lengths with ropes knotted at intervals. Rope stretchers were a class of workers who specialized in accurate measurement. To get right angles, they likely used the 3-4-5 triangle rule, which is essentially Pythagorean. Evidence suggests the concept of a 90-degree triangle with sides 3 to 4 to 5 was known practically, if not theoretically. All this provided the foundation for their bold designs, but doing the math on paper or papyrus is one thing. Physically executing it with tens of thousands of labourers is another. The Great Pyramid, for example, required installing roughly 800 blocks per week, on average, over about 20 years. That's a daunting pace, but not impossible with an organised workforce. Archaeologist Mark Lehner once broke it down. If 20,000 workers each moved an average of one 2.5-ton block in a month, they'd more than meet the quota. In an assembly line fashion, while one crew was placing a stone on the structure, another crew would be quarrying the next one, a third crew hauling one up the ramp, and so on in rotation. One crucial understanding is that the pyramids likely grew in tiers or steps initially, even the Great Pyramid. That is, the builders erected the core in a series of mastaba-like layers. This would create a stepped pyramid shape temporarily. Then they would fill in the steps with casing blocks from bottom to top. In the case of Khufu's pyramid, there's evidence that as they finished sections of casing, they built small secondary ramps or used the Grand Gallery as an internal ramp to move the largest granite blocks upwards. Herodotus's account that they finished the top first and base last probably reflects that they put casing stones starting at the top once the core was done, and worked downward, removing ramps as they went. Logical, so debris wouldn't mar finished surfaces below. Even with all this planning, the builders faced myriad challenges. They had to ensure the pyramid didn't tilt or settle unevenly, which is why a solid bedrock foundation was ideal. They had to maintain the intended angle consistently. If one side started to drift shallower or steeper, the pyramid would twist or meet incorrectly at the apex. We see that in some lesser pyramids, like one at Meidum or the pyramid of Amenemhat III at Dashur, that partially collapsed in the Middle Kingdom due to excessive weight on a subpar foundation. But at Giza, the execution was nearly flawless. When the four sides of Khufu's pyramid were built up, they met within a few centimetres at the summit. It's thought they might have left a small platform near the top during construction to align the final courses from all sides together. The level of precision achieved boggles the mind. The Great Pyramid's base is level within about 2 centimetres overall. The sides are oriented within minutes of arc to true north-south, east-west, likely to align with North Star or due north as determined by star transit method. Many have marvelled at the mathematical subtleties. The perimeter of the base divided by twice the height equals pi, 3.14, within a small margin. Did the Egyptians know pi intentionally, or was it a coincidence of using a particular slope? The 51.5 degree slope happens to produce that ratio. We're not sure. They didn't leave notes saying, "We chose this angle to encode pi," but they did likely have an approximation of pi in practice, as needed for circular calculations. Also, the Great Pyramid's slope corresponds to a rise of 14 units for every 11 units horizontally in cubit measure, which might have been chosen because 1411 is about 1.273, and the ancient eye might have found that aesthetically pleasing or structurally sound. Some argue that might be tied to a 7 to 5.5 sect in palms, how Egyptians described slopes. The interior required careful engineering too. How to cut a long descending tunnel at a constant slope through rock. They had to measure angles and straight lines in dark tunnels, likely using plumb bobs and sighting lines with oil lamps. The junction of the ascending and descending passages in Khufu's pyramid is amazingly precise. The multi-ton granite plugs that sealed the ascending passage were cut to fit so snugly that they remained in place until Arab excavators dynamited around them in the 820s AD. In the relieving chambers above the king's chamber, the planners used not only beams, but left some gaps and spaces, an intuitive, if not analytical strategy to diffuse the weight. These chambers weren't meant to be seen by human eyes. They were purely functional spaces. Yet they are finished reasonably flat and even have graffiti from the workers. Famously, one graffito found in the highest chamber by its modern discoverer in 1837 includes a work crew name, Friends of Khufu, along with a mark that seems to spell Khufu, thereby solidly linking the Great Pyramid to Khufu historically, a vital piece of evidence against any notion of a lost civilization building it. Of course, unanswered questions remain about construction. How exactly did they manage the final closing of the pyramid? Did they leave a gap to haul remaining blocks inside, then plug it from above? Or did they haul from outside until the very last casing piece was dropped in by lever from the top? We can only hypothesize. There's also the ongoing debate, where did the giant granite blocks of the king's chamber get raised? Possibly straight up the Grand Gallery, which may have had a sturdy wooden scaffold turning it into a ramp inside the pyramid, with pulleys or counterweights. The Grand Gallery's layout with slots along the ramps hints that wooden beams might have been lodged across at intervals, perhaps to brace a massive haul system or act as stops for a trolley. As we consider all these possibilities, one thing becomes evident. There was no magic involved, only human ingenuity and labour. This point bears emphasis because through the ages, whenever people couldn't immediately fathom how the pyramids were built, they often resorted to explaining it via legend or supernatural help, from gods or later aliens, which we'll get to. But archaeology has revealed the very human fingerprints on these projects, literally in some cases, like finger smears in mortar. We find ramps, tools, workers' barracks, accounting papyri. There isn't anachronistic technology, rather there is a mastery of available technology. By the time the Great Pyramid was completed, Egyptians had proven themselves master engineers of their era. They had systematically tackled a series of problems. How to quarry millions of tons of stone. They developed large quarrying techniques and logistics. How to move them, ramps, sledges, river transport. How to lift them, levers, inclined planes. How to position them precisely, measuring, levelling, casing from top down. How to create internal spaces that wouldn't collapse, corbelling, relieving chambers, how to feed and organise a small army of labour, centralised administration, worker villages. It was perhaps the world's first mega-project requiring state-level coordination comparable to later endeavours like building cathedrals or even modern infrastructure projects. In the end, what stands out is that the ancient Egyptians approached building the pyramids not just as back-breaking work, but as a labour of faith and national effort. They didn't have computers or engines, but they had a deep understanding of materials. They exploited the properties of wet sand, of rolling logs, of tensile strength of ropes, of weight distribution, and they had an almost modern level of project management, broken into tasks and phases, and behind it all was a powerful motivation to fulfill a religious duty and ensure their king's eternal life, which in their worldview meant maintaining the cosmic order for everyone's benefit. This fusion of practicality and spirituality is key to appreciating the pyramid's construction. They were as much spiritual endeavours as engineering ones. Now that the engineering picture is clearer, we have to ask, why go to these lengths at all? The pyramids were technically tombs, but they were unlike any tombs before or since in scale. What drove the Egyptians to pursue this mode of monument? The answer lies in their mythology and spiritual worldview, which invested the pyramids with profound meaning. To truly grasp where the pyramids came from, we must delve into the mind of ancient Egypt, into their religion, symbolism, and cosmic philosophy, because it was within those beliefs that the pyramids were conceived as necessary and effective. The pyramids were far more than grand mausoleums. For the ancient Egyptians, a pyramid was a sacred instrument, part celestial gateway, part resurrection machine, part statement of divine kingship. These stone leviathans are the physical embodiment of a people's longing for eternity and their intricate relationship between life, death, and the cosmos. At the heart of it was the concept of the pharaoh himself. In Egyptian belief, the pharaoh was not just a man, he was a living god-king, an incarnation of the divine. While alive, the king was associated with Horus, the falcon sky god who ruled the living. In death, the king became an Osiris, the god of the dead who was reborn. The pharaoh's well-being in the afterlife wasn't just a personal matter, it was a matter of national cosmic importance. A deceased king who successfully joined the gods would help maintain Ma'at, the divine order of the universe. The Nile would flood on time, the sun would rise each day, enemies would be held at bay. Thus, ensuring the king's resurrection was ensuring the continued stability of creation. Given this heavy burden, the Egyptians spared no effort to create a proper divine abode for the king's afterlife. The shape of the pyramid itself carried symbolic weight. One theory is that it represents the Ben-Ben, the primordial mound from the creation myth of Heliopolis. In that myth, before the world existed, there was only dark water and chaos, until a single mound of earth emerged, the Ben-Ben, upon which the creator god Atum, or Ra, stood to begin forming life. The pyramid, with its broad base and tapered top, is like an abstracted mound. Its capstone, often gilded, could be seen as the Ben-Ben stone itself, a gleaming point of first light. Notably, in Heliopolis there was a sacred stone, likely pyramid-shaped, that symbolized the sun's first appearance. Some scholars suggest the pyramids are that creation myth writ large in stone, each pyramid a recreation of the first mound, a place of regeneration. Another theory sees the pyramid shape as metaphorical sunbeams. In Egyptian art, the sun's rays are sometimes drawn as a cascade of lines ending in hands. The pyramid's four sloping faces could be perceived as solidified rays of the sun descending to earth. A text from a later pyramid of King Unas reads, "Behold, the king climbs on the light rays of the sun to the sky." And indeed, when you watch the sun over a pyramid, it does seem as if the light naturally slides down those angled sides. To reinforce this solar connection, pharaohs of the later 4th and 5th dynasties explicitly emphasized the sun cult. By the 5th dynasty, pharaohs called themselves Son of Ra, and they built separate sun temples with obelisks. But the pyramid remained a crucial link. It was likely considered a sort of sunrise machine for the soul. Each morning when the golden capstone caught the first sunlight, perhaps they believed it magically transfused that light down through the pyramid, energizing the king's spirit within. The orientation of the pyramids further underscores cosmic connections. The Great Pyramid's alignment to true north may tie to the imperishable stars, the circumpolar stars that never set. Egyptian texts yearn for the king to join those undying stars as they represented eternity. Meanwhile, the pyramid's east-west axis, causeway running east to the Nile, mirrored the journey of the sun from birth to death to rebirth. The entrance of many Old Kingdom pyramids is on the north side, facing North Star, but by the Middle Kingdom they shifted to the west, perhaps emphasizing the land of the dead. In either case, the idea was to connect the tomb to the greater cosmos, to plug the pharaoh's soul into the mechanisms of the heavens. Inside the pyramids, starting with Unas, the walls were inscribed with spells that literally function as a script for the pharaoh's soul to follow. They speak directly to the deceased. "O king, raise yourself. Take your throne among the stars. The gates of the sky are opened for you." The presence of those texts reveals how the Egyptians thought of the pyramid not as a mere storage for a body, but as a launch facility. The spells are full of imagery of climbing, flying, sailing. The king goes forth by day as a falcon, as a beam of light, as a new star. The pyramid's passages might have been aligned to certain stars to facilitate this. For instance, the Great Pyramid's narrow air shafts, small channels from the king's and queen's chambers angled to the exterior, are famously aligned. One from the king's chamber points to where Orion's belt would have been in the sky around 2500 BC, another to the circumpolar stars. From the queen's chamber, one pointed towards Sirius, associated with Isis, and another roughly to the northern stars. Were these star shafts purely symbolic, or did they serve as literal corridors for the king's K to travel out into the heavens? It's poetic to think an ancient engineer-astronomer might have said, "Let's give the king's soul a window to his target, Orion, the abode of Osiris." Orion, after all, represented Osiris, and there is a pyramid text utterance where the king says, "Behold, I am Orion, the Osiris of the sky." On a more down-to-earth spiritual level, the pyramids were parts of larger funerary landscapes that enacted the cycle of life, death, and rebirth. The Valley Temple is where the king's body, after mummification, would undergo ceremonies like the opening of the mouth, reanimating his senses for use in the afterlife. The causeway symbolized the journey westward, perhaps even the voyage through the underworld. The mortuary temple adjoining the pyramid was the stage for daily offerings by priests to nourish the king's spirit. The king's mummy lay sealed deep in the pyramid, in darkness, but the Ka, life force of the king, could venture out to the temple to partake in offerings. The Bi, soul, could fly out of the pyramid to roam the world or sky and return to the body as needed. The architecture facilitated this. False doors in the temple allowed the car to pass. Small conduits or those star shafts allowed the bar to depart. To the Egyptians, death was not an end, but a transformation. The pyramid was essentially a cocoon for this transformation, like the chrysalis for a butterfly. Within its depths, via mummification and ritual, the king would shed his mortal skin and emerge as an ark, a transfigured spirit, eternal and luminous. The step pyramid complex of Djoser includes a delightful touch, a dummy pair of doors on the pyramid's north side, and a statue of Djoser peering out through a hole. This was perhaps so Djoser's spirit could gaze upon the rising sun each day. The Great Pyramid's design likewise ensured that the king could symbolically see or access critical cosmic events. There's also an element of political symbolism. Pyramids were propaganda in stone. They loudly proclaimed the pharaoh's divine power and the centralized might of his state. They were visible far and wide. On a clear day, the Great Pyramid would gleam like a white mountain, possibly visible from the high ground dozens of miles away. Imagine the psychological impact on someone from a foreign land or a distant province arriving by boat and seeing these geometric monoliths on the horizon. It would be clear that Egypt was a land of incredible order and resources, led by a being of extraordinary capability. Even today they inspire awe, how much more so in ancient times when they were pristine. Herodotus tells a story that as generations passed, the Egyptians came to resent the pyramid-building pharaohs for their cruelty. Whether that's true or not, it's likely that building pyramids was hard on the populace and treasury. Yet it seems the Egyptians continued doing it willingly for quite some time, which indicates that it wasn't just coerced labour, there was belief involved. Workers left graffiti like "How splendid is the Pyramid of Khufu," perhaps genuine pride. The pyramid was a national project that tied everyone, from high priests to village corvée workers, into a shared religious national enterprise. We should mention how pyramids interacted with the concept of the afterlife in broader Egyptian religion. For common Egyptians, they couldn't have pyramids. They were buried in simpler graves, but many aspects of royal ideology filtered down. By the New Kingdom, even non-royals placed pyramidions atop their tomb chapels and inscribed coffin texts or Book of the Dead spells to ensure their safe passage. The pyramid form itself became a motif of protection and aspiration. Even today, small pyramid-shaped tombs exist in some cemeteries, an unconscious echo of this very old idea that a pyramid is a conduit to eternity. The spiritual significance of pyramids, in short, is vast. They were the intersection of earth, the tomb base, and sky, the pointed tip, of human effort and divine aspiration, of death and rebirth. They allowed the pharaoh to become an eternal star and an everlasting king in the afterlife, joining the pantheon to watch over Egypt. And by doing so, it was believed he ensured the sun would continue to rise and the Nile flood, cosmic stability. So, the pyramids were also monuments to life, life unending, life in harmony with cosmic cycles. It's worth noting the ancient Egyptians themselves left some clues to how they perceived pyramids. The name of Khufu's pyramid was Akhet Khufu, meaning horizon of Khufu. What a poetic concept. The horizon is where the sky meets the earth, where the sun rises and sets, essentially a gateway between worlds. To call the pyramid the king's horizon is to say it's the place he will appear eternally, like the sun on the horizon each morning. Similarly, Khafre's pyramid was called Great is Khafre, Menkaur's Divine is Menkaur, each name encapsulating the power and sanctity of the structure as reflecting the king's status. Unas's pyramid was modest, but its internal texts proclaim, "This is Unas, who has become the great star in the sky." The pyramids quite literally fulfilled the Egyptian belief in making the king a star, an object in the sky, fixed and shining. As with all things, though, pyramids had a dual nature. On the one hand, they were deeply spiritual, but on the other, they were worldly displays of wealth and power. That mix has always made people wonder, even in antiquity, if there wasn't some secret or mystery behind them. This curiosity and mystique have given rise to many alternative theories over the years about where the pyramids came from and how they were built. Theories involving lost civilizations, advanced ancient technology, or even extraterrestrial help. It's a testament to the pyramid's otherworldly aura that some people even doubt humans could have built them unaided. We should explore these alternative or fringe theories, not to lend them undue credence, but to understand the full spectrum of pyramid fascination. In doing so, we can appreciate what's fact and what is fanciful, and why the truth of the pyramids is, in many ways, just as marvelous as the speculation. The grandeur and mystery of the pyramids have always invited speculation beyond the scholarly and the mundane. From ancient legends of giants and sorcerers to modern TV shows about aliens and Atlantis, alternative theories abound about who built the pyramids and for what purpose. It's only fair in this sweeping exploration to acknowledge these ideas, to open that chamber of secrets and see what glitters and what is mere dust. As we do, we'll keep an open mind but also a critical eye, weighing these notions against evidence. One enduring proposition is that the pyramids were the product of a lost civilization, one far older or more advanced than the Egyptians of the 4th dynasty. The tale of Atlantis, first told by Plato as a philosophical fable, has been grafted onto Giza in many modern imaginings. Could it be some wonder that survivors of a sunken advanced culture came to Egypt and taught the locals how to build pyramids, or even built them before recorded history? Proponents of such ideas often point to supposed anomalies. The precision of the pyramids is too high, they claim, to fit the abilities of simple Bronze Age farmers, or they cite the Great Sphinx's heavily eroded body as evidence it dates back to a rainier epoch, thousands of years earlier than Khafra, suggesting a civilization predating dynastic Egypt made it, and perhaps the pyramids. It's true that the Sphinx shows significant erosion, and some geologists like Robert Schoch argued it could be from heavy rainfall circa 7000 to 5000 BC. That drew speculation that an unknown culture carved it and maybe built proto-pyramids. However, most Egyptologists and many geologists contend the erosion is explainable by wind, sand, and periodic flooding, plus the fact that the Sphinx's head, protected by harder rock and possibly recarved in pharaonic times, is much less eroded than the body. Additionally, everything around the Sphinx, the adjacent Sphinx Temple, the pyramids and their surrounding tombs, fits neatly in Old Kingdom context. There is a continuous archaeological record from the primitive graves of prehistory through the gradual steps to pyramid building. If an Atlantean superculture had erected pyramids around 10,000 BC, we'd expect to find tools or inscriptions or debris from that era around the sites. We do not. Instead, we find workers' villages from circa 2500 BC and graffiti by Khufu's work gangs, even an accounting papyrus from his reign. The evidence solidly credits the Egyptians we know with building the pyramids. So why do lost civilization theories persist? Perhaps because the pyramids seem so beyond ordinary experience that some feel they must have involved extraordinary knowledge. Also, there's a certain romantic appeal, the notion of a forgotten chapter of human history that might have possessed secrets of construction or technology now lost. It's the stuff of fantasy novels and movies, and undeniably intriguing. But the real story of Egyptians developing skills step by step is backed by mountains or pyramids of evidence. We see the evolution from mastaba tombs to step pyramids to true pyramids. We see experiments that failed and lessons learned, like at Meidum and the Bent Pyramid. This incremental progress is inconsistent with the idea of a fully formed advanced blueprint handed down from a lost age. In reality, the pyramids appear to be the genius of the Egyptians themselves, which, if one thinks about it, is even more inspiring than the idea that someone else did it for them. Another wildly popular notion is that the pyramids were built with help from, or under the direction of, extraterrestrials. The so-called ancient astronaut theory got mainstream attention in the late 20th century through books like Chariots of the Gods by Erich von Däniken. Under this theory, alien visitors, perhaps seen as gods by ancient people, provided the advanced know-how or even physical labour to create monumental structures worldwide, pyramids in Egypt, Stonehenge, the Nazca Lines, etc. They argue things such as the stones are too heavy for humans to move, the alignment is too precise to be done without modern instruments, or that certain depictions in hieroglyphs, which are often misinterpreted, like the so-called light bulb in Dendera, which is actually a lotus flower with a snake, symbolic of creation, show high technology. Engaging as the idea is, and it has fueled countless science fiction tales, there's no actual evidence of alien involvement. We find no microchips in the desert, no laser-cut megaliths, only chisels, sledges and human skeletons with arthritis from hard labour. The achievements of the pyramid builders can be explained with the tools and techniques we know they had. As we've done in detail, why attribute it to aliens? Often because of an underestimation of ancient people's capabilities or an overestimation of the difficulty of moving big rocks. We must remember, humans built Gothic cathedrals without electricity or engines, structures of immense complexity and beauty. Humans colonized nearly every environment on Earth using Stone Age tools. Building a pyramid with enough organization is within human capacity. It's actually a bit sad to think we would credit little green men before crediting our own ancestors with ingenuity. Interestingly, no ancient Egyptian text ever says beings came from the sky to build for us. Instead, they proudly inscribed their kings' names on the monuments and their own. The workers even left those graffiti with Khufu's name inside hidden chambers, presumably never meant to be seen by the public, which argues strongly against any kind of later forgery. It's genuine evidence that ordinary Egyptians built this under Khufu's reign. Alternative theories also venture into the realm of high technology existing in ancient Egypt, not extraterrestrial, but perhaps Egyptians harnessing powers we didn't realize. Some fringe theorists propose that the Egyptians had a form of electrical knowledge, pointing to the Baghdad battery, a small jar with an iron rod found in Iraq that might have been used for electroplating, though there's no clear link to Egypt's pyramids. Others imagine that they knew secrets of acoustics or sonic levitation. Claims that priests could use sound or chant to lift stones. No evidence of that beyond mythic storytelling. There's the enduring myth of pyramid power, the idea that the pyramid shape itself can preserve food or sharpen razors. Experiments have largely debunked these claims. Any effects observed were either minor or not reproducible under controlled conditions. Another line of alternative thought deals with mathematical or geographical codes hidden in the pyramids. People have noted that the Great Pyramid sits very nearly at the intersection of Earth's longest lines of latitude and longitude that cover land. Essentially, it's near the centroid of Earth's landmass distribution. Others point out its alignment and dimensions in code values like pi or the mean distance to the Sun or the circumference of the Earth, depending on what units you use. Could that be intentional? Those who support these ideas think the pyramid builders had advanced knowledge of the globe and math, perhaps given by an earlier civilization or aliens. The consensus view is that most of these correlations are coincidental or a result of selective interpretation. For instance, the Great Pyramid's latitude is about 29.9792 degrees north, and interestingly, the speed of light is 299,792 kilometers per second, a curious numerical match, but utterly coincidental since the ancients didn't use decimal degrees or kilometers. And what are the odds? Well, with enough numbers to play with, you can find some that match something meaningful to us. It's like finding patterns in clouds. The Egyptians likely didn't intend to encode the speed of light, claiming that would mean they had precision timekeeping and distance measurement to derive it, which they did not. However, it's worth mentioning that the Egyptians were quite mathematical in a practical sense. The Rind Mathematical Papyrus, a Middle Kingdom document, shows they could calculate areas, volumes, and use fractions deftly. They probably did have an approximation of pi, perhaps 22/7 for certain calculations like circular granaries. So if the pyramid's proportions have elegant ratios, it could be by design or by happenstance of choosing convenient integers for rise, shrun, the sekid. But what they did not leave behind was any text like, by the way, we aligned the pyramid with the North Pole because X, and we made its shape encode pi because Y. Without that, these ideas remain speculative overlays by modern minds. The allure of thinking there's a secret code or hidden message in the pyramids is strong. It suggests a Da Vinci Code-style mystery to be unravelled. In the 19th century, a whole field called pyramidology arose where enthusiasts measured the interior passages of the Great Pyramid and claimed they predicted biblical events or world history in the lengths of corridors, like inches corresponding to years. They got quite carried away. None of that turned out credible under scrutiny. It was more a projection of those people's desires for prophecy and mystique. So, stepping back, why do alternative theories persist despite evidence? Partly because the pyramids provoke awe, and with awe sometimes comes disbelief. It's that feeling of, I can't imagine humans doing this, so maybe something else did. It's also because the pyramids still have unknowns, like what's in that newly detected void, or exactly how the labour was organised. And in the absence of full knowledge, speculation grows to fill the gap. There's also an element of the allure of the mysterious. Some people simply prefer an exciting unknown or conspiracy to a well-documented explanation. Additionally, for over a millennium after the Pyramid Age, even Egyptians themselves lost certain knowledge, like how to read hieroglyphs or who exactly some pyramids belonged to. By the New Kingdom, some attribution was confused. So, alternative explanations and myth-making began early. Interestingly, some alternative notions have spurred real investigations that produced real discoveries. The theory of hidden chambers led to the Scan Pyramids project, scanning Khufu's pyramid with muon detectors, and they indeed found a big void that we didn't know about. Now, that void is likely a leftover gap in construction or a relieving space, not an alien control room, but it shows that continuing to probe the pyramids can yield surprises. And sometimes the line between fringe and scientific inquiry can blur. A quest to find mysteries might still motivate new technology that finds something prosaic but interesting. In sum, after looking at all these fringe theories, what emerges is that the known, factual story of the pyramids is still the most compelling. That a society in the Stone Bronze Age could marshal such knowledge and organisation to build these colossal geometric marvels says something incredibly inspiring about human capability. We don't need aliens or Atlanteans when we have Khufu and Imhotep and thousands of unnamed Egyptians who together achieved what was arguably the world's first great feat of engineering. The real story has drama aplenty, visionary leaders, trial and error, breakthroughs in design, the sweat of tens of thousands, and an unwavering spiritual drive. And yet, it's not hard to understand why alternative ideas arise. The pyramids are just that extraordinary. They make us dream and speculate. They challenge our hubris. Were we really more advanced than ancients, or just standing on their shoulders? They spark the imagination, leading some to UFOs and others to mystical energies. In a way, these fringe theories are a tribute. They're modern folklore blossoming around an ancient wonder, much as the ancients themselves wove myth around these structures. Having explored those outer fringes, let's return to solid ground and see how modern science and archaeology are continuing to unravel the pyramids' remaining mysteries in a more systematic way. Paradoxically, today's high-tech tools can seem almost magical. We can scan through stone and peer into voids never seen by human eyes. What are these new discoveries, and how are they rewriting our understanding? And after all that, what do the pyramids ultimately mean to us, here and now? As we near the end of our journey, the sands of Giza have a few more secrets to yield, and the pyramids have a few more lessons to impart about human aspiration and legacy. Here in the 21st century, the pyramids of Egypt remain dynamic subjects of exploration. They may be ancient, but they are not static. We are still uncovering new information about them, sometimes quite literally peeking into hidden places that have been sealed for millennia. Modern science has effectively armed us with wizard eyes to see through stone and magic carpets, drones and satellites, to survey the desert from above. The result? A string of exciting discoveries that prove there is still much to learn. Take satellite imagery. Using high-resolution satellites and even infrared sensing, archaeologists like Dr. Sarah Parkek have identified subsurface anomalies consistent with buried structures. In 2011, Parkek announced that her team's satellite survey had potentially spotted the remains of 17 undiscovered pyramids, along with thousands of ancient tombs and settlements, by detecting subtle differences in vegetation and soil that indicate walls or foundations underground. Now, not all of these have been ground-truthed. A couple of supposed pyramid sites turned out to be something else upon excavation, but the approach has revolutionized how we locate sites. In a country like Egypt, with its shifting sands and growing towns, being able to map archaeological features from space is invaluable. It's possible that some smaller pyramids, maybe provincial step pyramids or satellite pyramids, still lie hidden, found first not by a desert trekker, but by a computer analysing pixel data from orbit. Then there's LiDAR, light detection and ranging, a technique where lasers mounted on drones or planes send pulses to the ground to create ultra-detailed topographic maps. LiDAR has famously found lost cities in jungles like the Maya region, but in Egypt it can help detect minute height variations in flat desert that might signal collapsed structures. It has been used around Saqqara and Dahshur to map out the terrain and old walls buried under sand. For example, at Dahshur, LiDAR and magnetometry surveys helped reveal the layout of pyramid complexes and their temples that are now ruinous mounds. By peeling back the desert veneer digitally, we can recreate layouts of entire funerary landscapes. One of the most jaw-dropping modern initiatives is the Scan Pyramids project, which employs cosmic ray muon radiography to scan the insides of pyramids non-invasively. In 2017, this team of scientists from France, Japan and Egypt announced they had detected a previously unknown void deep within Khufu's Great Pyramid, a space roughly 30 meters long above the Grand Gallery, in an area not accessible by any known passage. This was like finding a hidden room in the attic of a house you've lived in all your life, without even entering. We literally used particle physics to X-ray one of the wonders of the world. The void's purpose is still uncertain. It could be a leftover construction cavity. Some hypothesize the Grand Gallery, and this void together allowed an internal ramp or just lightened the structure. Or it might be an undiscovered chamber, though getting to it physically without damaging the pyramid is a challenge. Any traditional excavation is out of the question. The mere existence of such a sizable, unknown space in the Great Pyramid was a humbling reminder that these monuments can still keep secrets despite being studied for centuries. And it didn't stop there. In 2023, Scan Pyramids made headlines again. Using an endoscopic camera threaded through a tiny drilled hole, they revealed the first images of a hidden corridor just behind the north face of the Great Pyramid above the original entrance. This corridor is about 9 meters long, with a triangular cross-section formed by chevron blocks, It likely was a structural feature, perhaps meant to reduce weight over the entrance, or perhaps part of design to access something, but it's new to us. Seeing it, perfectly preserved with its ceiling stones leaning together, felt almost like peering back in time to the moments of construction. No one had walked that little passageway since the pyramid was sealed. These kinds of non-invasive explorations blend high-tech with the thrill of classic archaeology. Meanwhile, conventional archaeology with trowel and brush continues to yield finds around the pyramids. In the last couple of decades, excavations of the Workers' Cemetery at Giza by Egyptologist Zahi Hawass unearthed the tombs of some of the overseers and craftsmen, containing skeletal remains that show arthritis and healed fractures, consistent with heavy labour, but also evidence of good medical care. Some injuries were set properly. This lends further weight to the picture of a cared-for workforce, not slaves worked to death without aid. A few tomb inscriptions from Giza mention titles like Director of Draftsmen for the Pyramid or Overseer of Limestone Quarrying, which give us specific roles and human faces behind the construction effort. At other pyramid sites, archaeologists have stumbled upon new mini-pyramids. In 2005, a previously unknown small pyramid, possibly for a queen, was found near the larger pyramid of Teti at Saqqara. In 2017, remains of what is believed to be a 13th dynasty, 1800s BC, small pyramid surfaced at Dashur. It had mostly collapsed, but the substructure and some inscribed blocks identified it as a king's daughter's pyramid. These remind us that not all pyramids are giant. Many rulers and royals built smaller ones that time has reduced to rubble. Modern science has also tackled materials. Analysis of the mortar used in the Great Pyramid shows it's made of gypsum, a common ancient mortar, but interestingly, it's stronger than the stones it binds, perhaps contributing to the pyramid's durability. There were theories that some pyramid blocks, especially at the top, might have been cast as a kind of early concrete from liquefied limestone. A few materials scientists suggested it in the 2000s, seeing unusual microbubbles in some stones. This geopolymer theory remains contentious. Most geologists and Egyptologists see clear evidence of carved natural stone in all cases, and the casting idea isn't widely accepted. Still, it shows the creative ways researchers test hypotheses, from scanning electron microscopes on rock samples to chemical content analysis. One cannot overstate the significance of the Meera diary discovered in 2013 at Wadi al-Jarf on the Red Sea coast. It's a cache of papyri, the logbooks of an official named Meera, who oversaw boat crews shipping limestone to Giza in Khufu's last years. Published in 2016, this find was essentially like unearthing a scribbled shipping manifesto that confirms in plain words what we logically assumed. Docked at Tura, loaded 40 jars of stone for the pyramid, delivered to Akhet Khufu, crew is tired but in good spirits. Paraphrased. It mentions Ankaf, a known prince and project manager. This is direct contemporary evidence of the supply chain for Khufu's pyramid, an extraordinary historical document to complement the physical evidence. It's as if a foreman's diary from the Empire State Building construction had surfaced, detailing mundane yet crucial tasks, bringing life to what can otherwise be an impersonal feat. All these high-tech and low-tech discoveries combine to refine our understanding. We no longer have to rely on the wild guesses of ancient historians or the overactive imagination of Victorian theorists. We can check, measure, and sometimes literally look inside. Does that demystify the pyramids? Perhaps a bit. As we see more pieces of the puzzle, the picture gets clearer. But, intriguingly, some mystery always remains, because each answer often begets new questions. What exactly is that big void? Why did they leave a corridor and not fill it? Was something intended to be accessed later? Are there any objects or inscriptions hidden that could be recovered without harm? Time and careful science will tell. One thing modern research continuously underscores is the humanity of the pyramid builders. We find their footprints and fingerprints in paths worn into ramps, in hieratic notes on blocks, this side up, in the gentle way a skeleton's bones knit after an injury, implying someone took care of that injured worker. It's profoundly moving. These huge pyramids might suggest an image of brute mass and tyranny, but the details reveal community and intention. For instance, near Menkaur's pyramid, excavators found a tiny votive offering buried, perhaps left by a worker asking the gods for protection or giving thanks for the project's safety. In a sense, the pyramids are still doing what they were meant to do, inspiring wonder and prompting people to think beyond themselves. For the ancient Egyptians, that meant imagining eternity and aligning with the cosmos. For us, it means contemplating the depths of history and the heights of human achievement. The pyramids have made individuals throughout time reflect on big themes: time, mortality, ambition, legacy. And so we arrive at a final contemplation. After all the data and dates, ramp theories and star alignments, one still stands in awe of these pyramids. Visiting them, or even just envisioning them, one cannot escape a flood of existential thoughts. They make you consider your own fleeting life in contrast to these monuments that have endured for over 45 centuries. They make you wonder about the people who built them. Did they sense they were creating something timeless? They cause us to ask, what of ourselves will last that long? And does it even matter if nothing does? There is a kind of poetry to the pyramids that goes beyond their stones and measurements. Percy Shelley captured a slice of it in his sonnet Ozymandias, where a traveller encounters the ruins of a once great king's statue in the desert with the inscription, "Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair," pointing out the ultimate futility of arrogance against time. The irony is that for that fictional Ozymandias, nothing remained but broken pieces. Yet here at Giza, Khufu's works still stand, enormous and unmistakable. One could almost imagine Khufu answering Shelley, "Not all fell to dust, but in truth even Khufu's glory is gone, his body likely long decayed or stolen, his treasures plundered. What remains is the idea of Khufu embodied by the pyramid." The ancient Egyptians believed that to speak a person's name was to make them live again. By that measure, every time we say Khufu or Khafra or Giza, we are participating in their immortality. The pyramids, then, succeeded in ways their builders perhaps didn't anticipate. They wanted the pyramids to guarantee their king's afterlife and the nation's prosperity. The afterlife part, who can say? But they certainly guaranteed remembrance. These gigantic tombs turned their occupants into legends. They also became a mirror in which each era and individual sees something different. To some, they are symbols of human folly, piling up rocks, thinking one can cheat death. To others, they symbolize human genius, organizing labor and knowledge to achieve the unprecedented. They can represent spiritual yearning, reaching for the heavens, or oppressive power, the abilities of a god-king. In truth, they encapsulate all of that, the complexity of civilization. Philosophically, the pyramids force us to confront the concept of time, stand before one and realize it was ancient to Julius Caesar, it was ancient to Socrates. It was already over 1,000 years old when Moses, if he lived, is said to have been in Egypt. And here it is today, in our era of microchips and space travel, still essentially the same pile of masonry, painstakingly laid in the Bronze Age. Against that backdrop, how small our individual lives seem, and yet, conversely, how potent human efforts can be to echo across the ages. It's a paradox. The pyramids make you feel insignificant and profoundly connected to humanity at once. There is an emotional resonance too. Many visitors describe feeling a sense of peace or connection at the pyramids. Perhaps it's the geometry. The pyramid shape has a certain harmony. Perhaps it's the silent witness of their longevity, the desert setting, the play of light and shadow on those broad faces, the wind keening around those immovable corners. It's like nature and human art meeting in quiet conversation. Even with throngs of tourists, one can find a still corner at Giza at sunrise or sunset, sit on a weathered block and lean against warm stone, and just feel history wash over. You might fancy hearing faint echoes of chisels, or a priest's chant carried on the breeze, the impressions of memory held in the place. We began this journey with the silent night and those silhouettes in the starlight. Let's return there now, wiser about facts, but still susceptible to wonder. The sun has set over Giza. The horizon glows orange, then fades to purple. One by one, stars blink into being, the same stars that ancient Egyptians watched as they formulated the alignments of these monuments. Orion rises, as it did on nights when Khufu's workers trudged back to camp, tired but proud after raising another few layers of stone. The desert grows cool. In the distance, perhaps a jackal yips. In ancient times, a sacred sound, the call of Anubis, god of the necropolis. The pyramids stand, dark and triangular voids, against the deep blue of night. What do they say to us, those pyramids, in this hushed moment? They don't speak in words, yet they speak volumes. They tell us that vision can become reality, that an idea combined with effort can literally reshape landscapes. They remind us that life is transient, but culture endures. Khufu is long gone, but what he and his people built still touches us. They challenge us to think about what eternity means, not necessarily a literal afterlife of the pharaoh sailing with Ra, but eternity as the ripple one leaves in the pond of time. And maybe too they caution us, even the mightiest works are not immune to the slow, patient forces of nature. One day even these pyramids may erode to nubs. Eternity perhaps belongs only to the stars and the concept of eternity itself. Yet standing there, it's hard not to feel that the pyramids have achieved a slice of immortality. Through them the voices of the ancient builders still whisper. As a modern man or woman runs a hand along a limestone block and feels the slight tool marks, they are touching the fingers of that labourer from 4,500 years ago who carved it. In that sense, the pyramid is a message from one epoch to another saying, we were here, we strove, we believed, we created. Our exploration is ending, but the pyramids remain, as they likely will for ages hence. When we depart Giza, whether physically or in our imagination, we do so enriched by its story. The vast silence of the desert returns. The stars wheel overhead, and the great triangles of stone keep their vigil.